7:30, we're going to call the meeting to order at 7:30. It's the budget workshop for the Region 9 Board of Education. And our first order of business are approval of minutes. We have two sets of minutes to approve today, one from February 18th from the Joint Boards of Education special meeting, and one from February 18th for the Region 9 Board of Education regular meeting. We can probably take these separate. So may I have a motion on the joint board meetings minutes? Anyone?
I must abstain, I was not present.
Okay, so moved.
All right.
You can second.
I will second.
Okay, so Mike and Mary Liz, all right. Any corrections, changes, comments on those?
Yeah, so I have one correction where it says, Mr. Hocker commented that there has been no single process for senior administration hires.
We're at which paragraph?
This is paragraph 2 under discussion possible action.
Okay.
I'm going to suggest we put in, Mr. Hocker did not recall whether there has been a single process for senior administration hires.
Okay.
In fact, there has been, but he did not recall.
Okay. All right, anyone else? Any other changes? All right, then we'll go ahead and vote on it. The motion to approve the February 18th Joint Board of Education meeting minutes as amended. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
One
Abstained?
abstention.
One. Okay. All right, the next set of minutes are for the February 18th regular board meeting for Region 9. I have a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve.
All right.
Second it.
Thank you. So we'll go the other way. Mike. All right. Any discussion on those minutes?
Wonderful job.
All right. All right. Very good. No comments or changes. And all in favor of approving minutes for the February 18th regular board meeting? Say aye.
Aye.
All right. All right.
One abstention.
Abstention. Thank you. All right. Moving on then to item number 3, public comment. So as usual, we'd like you to come to the podium, announce your name and address, and keep your comments brief if you don't mind, please, because we have a lot of budget items to go through. So.
Certainly. Jeff Ligelman, Pocahontas Road, Reading. Thank you all for being here and engaged in this process. It's a pleasure to be here. So, why didn't more students sign up for Latin? I think the answer is simple. The administration proposed ending the Latin program in June of 2022. Further, the Visible Thinking presentation proposed not allowing grade 9 enrollment. Indeed, incoming freshmen generally do not sign up to study a language or any other discipline, knowing the program is proposed to end after their sophomore year. Maybe those same prospective students also looked at the plan for Latin for next year. Currently, there are 19 students in 2 sections of Latin covering 4 different levels. The proposal for next year has 18 students in 1 section, which will cover the same 4 levels. That's 1 section teaching Latin 2, Latin 3, Latin 4, and Latin 5. Simply not right. We would not accept 4 levels of English, math, French being taught in the same class. However, that is what is being proposed for Latin. And do you really think a teacher can effectively teach those 4 levels simultaneously? As a teacher, as an administrator, and as someone who has designed curriculum, I can assure you, you would be doing a disservice to our children. Another concern about the proposed dismantling of the Latin program is that it runs counter to Barlow's new requirement for foreign language study. Beginning next year, all incoming freshmen will have to study a language. There used to be 3 language choices, and in earlier times 4 or 5 choices. The proposal before you would ultimately narrow language choices to the lowest number in a generation, while at the same time requiring more students than ever to study a foreign language. I don't know how we can seriously call ourselves a comprehensive high school with such a limited program. Further, the current proposal makes it nearly impossible for our Latin students to qualify for the seal of biliteracy. We value capstone classes for seniors in other areas of study such as math, science, and English. We should also encourage and allow all of our world language students, including our Latin students, to complete their studies and achieve the seal of biliteracy, which, as the Connecticut State Department of Education guidelines explain, recognizes the value of students' academic efforts, the tangible benefits of being bilingual and biliterate, and prepares students to be 21st century global citizens in a multicultural, multilingual world. Further, those guidelines cover all world languages and specifically include classical languages. So how much would this cost? To continue teaching 2 sections of Latin, which would have 2 levels in each class and not the proposed 4, would reduce the proposed savings by $17,523. In a $24 million budget, that's less than a rounding error. That's what it would cost to keep faith with Barlow's Latin students and our principals. If you have children at Barlow, or who will attend Barlow, or if you simply care about the quality of education offered at Barlow, I hope you will take note of this decision. Enrollment will continue to decline before leveling off and rising again. And other programs that students expect to complete will have fewer and fewer students. We are either committed to let those students complete their studies, or we are not. To those of you new to this process, I think it's important to point out that we used to begin with a higher budget number and then work our way down. However, this year it's the opposite. All potential cuts have been put into the proposal, and it is up to you to say which cuts you do not want. And so I stand here today hoping that you will allow Barlow's Latin students to appropriately complete their studies. And I certainly hope that neither I nor anyone else has to stand here in future years hoping that their children's science program, or math program, or art program will end before they have a chance to finish. We are
Jeff Parker, Boarding Lorry Drive, Easton, Connecticut. Last night, the Easton Board of Education got the opportunity to meet with the Easton Board of Finance to discuss the 2021 budget. Before we got started in the board's presentation, the Board of Finance took the time, which frankly we appreciated, to let us know where the town stood in terms of the total dollars that were being asked for from all the various departments, plus a placeholder for Region 9. The total was $1,722,000, which is over a 5% increase. With 95% of that 1,722 assigned to education in one form or another, we are looking at a very, very difficult series of decisions because the Board of Finance is clear that a 5% increase is simply not going to be acceptable. Now, Easton doesn't have a Project Adventure. It doesn't have Gifted and Talented, and so there are no programs per se to go out and lessen or reduce or maybe even eliminate. So we're looking at a very, very, very tough series of decisions. Now, why am I here tonight to share that with you? Because I do understand that at the end of last year you had a significant balance. Part of it was tied to the bonding issue, which I think needs to stay there. But there was also $622,000 which were put into either health care or pensions, I believe. And out of that $622,000, it's roughly $280,000 of that is Easton taxpayer money. Now let me explain what $280,000 would allow us to do. It would allow us to restore the media specialists at Helen Keller Middle. It would allow for us to have extracurricular activities for all of our 8th grade students. It would allow us to hire an additional kindergarten teacher and para for next year because our population is moving from the 81 students we have in kindergarten this year to 94 projected for next year. I don't think we really want to have 23 and 24 kindergartners in a classroom. And it would also allow us to save a 1st grade teacher and a 2nd grade teacher from being eliminated and thereby changing our class sizes from the high teens to the low and mid 20s. These are all very, very difficult circumstances. This is my 7th year as being the board chair. Never seen anything else like it. But it is what it is, and Easton's going to have to deal with it. What I'm hoping for is that Region 9 will take the dollars that they had in excess last year and put it toward this year's budget to lower the budget so that we can, Easton can get the benefit of a less of an apportionment charge than we are now currently looking at. So again, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. If you do have questions, jparker@er9.org. Happy to take any emails, and if there's any further information that you need, I'd be happy to share it another time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, any other public comments? All right, seeing none, board member comments? Juliette, you want to, we'll start from that side.
No
Any
comment.
board member comment? No? Mike?
Nothing at this time.
Nothing from me?
Nothing at this time.
Okay. All right, and then before we go into the discussion and possible action, at this point, would you like to make any comments around coronavirus and our preparations here before we get into budget discussion?
Sure, let's talk about the coronavirus. I ask that we all approach this as the educators and parents that we are, with common sense and concern for the well-being of our kids, our staff, and our community. If you've been watching the news, as I have, you know that we are in the first phase of what's likely to be a period of time when many people are diagnosed. Viruses tend to expand exponentially, not arithmetically. So we know there's a handful of folks here and there. So we expect that the issue will continue for some time. I'd like the community to go back and look at the news reports you're hearing and the repeated remarks that people are saying that the COVID-19 virus can make children sick, but so far in this season, it hasn't killed a child or a teenager. It's much more dangerous to people in their 70s or 80s or people who are immunocompromised. So how does the school system prepare for this? Well, we're increasing our communication with the town to let you know what we're up to and our concerns. We have reviewed and improved our cleaning protocols. The principals of each of our 5 buildings are working daily with our custodial and nursing staff to keep track of the kids who are reporting to us to see if there's anything out of the ordinary in kids presenting their illnesses, but also to ensure that we're making all of the common sense actions for keeping the building clean that we can. I'd like folks who are aware that we use what's called green cleaning products. Please suspend the rumor that we're using cleaning products that don't actually clean. I've heard this a dozen times in the last couple of days. We're using products that have been approved for a public school. And included in that area of approval are decontaminants or sanitizers that are in fact fairly powerful. And just today, the Director of Buildings and Grounds received from the state a clarification on what can be used to keep surfaces clean, door handles, common areas, things that more than one person would touch. We've reviewed our hazard plan, and we are observing the protocols that are laid out there. The administration in ER9 in each of the buildings is coordinated with our local health department officers, with our police, emergency responders, and town governance about the best ways to protect our kids in our community. We have gone to every one of our transportation vendors. For most people, that's First Student, the bus company, but we also have transportation contracts with some of the sports teams and students with special needs who are transported off-site. And all of them are using increased cleaning, daily wipe downs of the buses. We've encouraged and continue to encourage people whose children appear to be sick in some way. They have the common flu, they have a cold, they have something else, keep your kids home. I have specifically directed every employee in ER9 to take a sick day if they're sick, which seems to you like, why wouldn't they do it? But you have very dedicated people who will come in when they're not feeling well, and we're saying to them, no, stay home. We are coordinating with the the Western Connecticut Association of Superintendents. That is about 14 school districts, including Ridgefield, Monroe, Danbury, Brookfield, Region 12, Region 15, New Fairfield, to collaborate regionally on our readiness for this virus, and it has not yet come into Connecticut. So we would be naive to think that it won't, that there's some magic at the border. So our task is to say we've put the schools physically into the best position possible to be clean. We're training the staff and the students to conduct good personal hygiene, and when the solution is simple, people ignore it. When the solution is complex, they'll go to great lengths to follow it. Solution is wash your hands for 20 seconds. The solution is keep your personal space secure. The solution is do a fist bump, not a handshake. And until we reach some other phase of the impact of the virus or some medical issue on our operations, to operate as normally as possible. We've made some decisions about some of our large group events. We have not yet reached a point where it would be appropriate to cancel absolutely everything that we do. We'll make a daily decision about that. We encourage people who have booked vacations for the spring break that are employees of ours to make sure that they have cancellation insurance in the event that maybe we need to use some of those days for public school. The state of Connecticut says that every school year will be 180 days long. They have not yet indicated a willingness to grant a waiver for that. Our school year is scheduled currently to end on the 12th of June at Barlow, or the 16th or 17th in the other two schools. That leaves us more than 2 weeks that in the event that we had to close our schools for some period of time, we could, unfortunately, extend that school year out to the end of June to get the 180 days. Or it could be that between now and later in this school year, the state it gives us some direction on what constitutes a full school year. We've been in contact with the College Board to talk about the previously scheduled and hard dates for the advanced placement assessments. They have as yet not indicated that they would move those dates, but we're still planning and preparing for our kids, our AP kids, to take those tests in May as they're currently scheduled. We've taken direction from the State Department of Public Health and the State Department of Education on how to be best postured for this virus or any other outbreak that might impact us. Using whatever we're using is fully in alignment with agencies farther up the food chain, the CDC or federal or state agencies. There's a question now that emerged, and I got to ask the community to remember, it is now Thursday of this week. Last Tuesday, this was not a question, an issue, a concern, an email, or attention was not paid by the media to this. We are a week and 2 days into this. So folks are saying, what is your comprehensive and detailed plan for every aspect of responding to this? And my answer is common sense, and adults will act as adults. It is our job to establish for the children a sense of security that we're going to make good decisions. But we are looking at now the implications of and the possibilities of the question, is it possible for the school system to function remotely if we have to close the 5 buildings for some period of time? What I heard today from the Director of Public Health in the city of Danbury is that the virus itself is actually fragile outside of a host, outside of a human body. It can exist for, in the research that she presented, 19 to 36 hours. So that means to us we've got to do a good job of cleaning and keeping personal distance. But it also means that there might be a possibility where you close the buildings for several days to get a deep clean. We've asked Walter to define what constitutes a deep surface clean that would purge the building. And it might be that we have to close our schools for some length of time, a week, 2 weeks. Nobody in the last 7 or 8 days has said you might have to close the schools for longer than that. So we have to do some contingency planning. And at the moment where we are with contingency planning is there are lots and lots of questions to be answered about, is it even feasible to be able to run a K-12 or a 9-12 school system through internet instructions, through online assignments where teachers are interacting with their students through the medium of the internet? We do not yet have the answers to those questions. We are both creating our own scenarios and seeking guidance from the state. So where we are is where I hope and expect we would all be. And being somewhat at the epicenter of this, my appeal to the community is listen to the news, but do not give up your capacity to exercise critical judgment. We at this table talk about critical thinking all the time. This has engaged us at an emotional, visceral level, and some of us are suspending our capacity to make rational decisions. We are very, 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 here comes one more, very serious about the safety and well-being of our kids, but we are not going to suspend intellectual, rational, reasonable, common sense protocol in pursuing these issues. There's collaboration, there's community work going on. We are completely coordinated with the town, emergency responders, regional, state, and larger areas. So what I'm asking us all to do right now is what the British did during the Battle of London. Remain calm and carry on. And we will communicate. We will take every reasonable step to make sure that our children, our adults, our seniors in the community are best served by what we can control and cover in the school systems. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that update and the continued communications out to the board and to the administration, to all the community as well as things evolve and procedures and processes and other items are being discussed here and keeping us informed on all that. Appreciate it. All right, so our next item is the discussion and possible action on the proposed budget for 2020, 2021. And before we get started, I'm going to lay on a couple of procedural comments around how we'd like to do the budget discussion this evening, since we have some new board members that haven't been through this process yet. I did ask Gina and Tom and Stephanie and Scott to just open with a recap of where we were last week, or last time we met, with the opening budget numbers, where we're at in the overall process, and then move forward by the categories that were laid out last week. And if we can talk through the categories, so things like the operations and transportation and so forth, let's limit the discussion to that particular category. See if we can get closure on that category, if there's anything else that we want to add back in or take out, and then move on to the next category if we can do that. as opposed to going line by line through the entire budget. I know we've done that in past years, and I'd like to stay away from that if we can. I know you're ready to flip the binder, but, so if we can go category by category, I think that would be good. Ultimately, I'd like to get a place where we can either have a motion this evening for approving a number, or having direction to go back to Gina and the staff and Scott to model. And I would like to limit the amounts of permutations and models that we've asked them to do. I know in the past, we've asked for 15 different versions, give me something at 0.25 and 0.1 and 1 and 1.5, which is a lot of work for everybody to reshuffle back through. I think we have a very thorough, thought-out budget in front of us right now that we don't need to go there. So I'd like to get to a point, either we have a motion tonight, or we have some direction, simplified for them to go back and take a look at the numbers and come back for next week's budget workshop. So if we get to a point tonight where we like the numbers, we can put a motion out and pass it. We have the next workshop next week if we need to further discuss things or see some variations in the models as well.
Yeah.
All right?
It would be
I'm being very
ambitious,
optimistic and
to
ambitious
say
that
the
we could
least,
get
that
there.
you're going to get the budget, and then
Well, let's see.
in 2 hours, you're going to have a number like,
Well, we'll see where we go. All right, so, with that, any other questions on process? All right, so then I will turn it over to you, Gina, to
Okay,
start
great.
us out.
Thank you, and I thank all of our department chairs and administrators who are here tonight. They're listed on the packet. Our public has copies of the budget, and it's in front, or the copies of the proposal, and the board has it in front of them. So a reminder of the process, we are in a second phase of this, a budget workshop on March 5th. Our next budget workshop is scheduled for March 12th, and our regular board meeting will take place on the 17th. So when we were last here in February, it was February 18th, we had a 1.23% budget, as you recall, but what was decided after the joint meeting of the boards was to remove the $60,000 that was associated with the ER9 Assistant Superintendent of Pupil Personnel Services. So our proposed budget is 0.98%, which is $24,369,537, a variance of $236,423. This is the apportionment. I'm on slide 4 right now. And we just did these numbers. In February 18th, we gave you the apportionment for a 1.23% budget. This is what the apportionment looks like for a 0.98% budget. And you can see that swing where Reading actually is paying less than they contributed last year, and Reading Easton is paying more. Since that February 18th budget, we'll take some time on this slide and answer any questions that you might have. I'm on slide 5. Since February 18th, some things have shifted, and we've needed to make some adjustments to the budget. So we'll take them, I'll go over the whole budget and then, or this whole slide, and then if you have specific questions, the people that are in front of you can answer those. So the first is a cost budget on slide 5, and that is an outplacement cost adjustments. So there were some adjustments in placement for some of our students with special needs, and it's left us with the need to have an additional $40,000 in the budget. Because of those adjustments, we're able to eliminate one behavior technician, and that would be a savings of $31,308. And the other item that goes along with those two is the decrease in the excess cost adjustment. So the amount of money that we expect to get back from the state actually is going to be less. And it would be less by about $23,800. That's what we are budgeting. And you could see all of these lines in budget book as you go through. So those three kind of go together. Go ahead, Mike.
can we explain that, because it doesn't, doesn't reason with me,
Right,
because it appears that an outplacement adjustment increased 40% because student or students are taken out of the school. You can reduce behavior therapist, whereas your reduction. So then it looks like there's an actual increase of 9,000-ish, 8,700. Now, an excess cost adjustment offset, a reduction of $23,800 would only occur if we hit the 4.5 times a student. So in order to hit 4.5 times a student, you'd have to be somewhere up around 95, 96,000.
110-ish.
Oh, 110, I was giving you the benefit of the doubt. So 110, so how does that fit in? Because that's something else, they're not related.
I think the easiest way to say that first line, outplacement cost adjustments, that reflects multiple students. So students who saw an increase need of services and students who saw a decrease need in those services, where we were able to back down through recent PPT decisions, in the last 2 weeks. And with this time, I was able to go back in and adjust those numbers. So some of those numbers were favorable to just simply be taking money out of the budget. Therefore, it was no longer going to reach that excess cost threshold. And then some students that were already in excess costs, there was an increase, but because they were already in there, it's only 70% of what that increase was going to be. So that's probably the easiest way to explain it, Mike. It involved multiple students, not just one.
So then, would it be accurate to paraphrase and say that this is more about serving the best needs of the student rather than anything else, because your adjustments actually cost us more money?
Mhm.
So it has really nothing to do with adjusting in an effort to be able to reduce costs or contain costs. These are adjustments that are made to enhance the offerings or the services for students, and it's
changing student needs.
and so it's costing us more.
Right, to make sure that
Okay.
we can deliver the services as per the IEP.
Okay, thank you.
that's a great distinction to make. So this isn't a technical edit, this is to
No.
meet the student needs that have arisen since February 18th. Those are the first three. The second has to do with the bridge FTE. In looking at our staff and looking at cross-endorsed staff, which the board is familiar with, if we were to fill the bridge position with the wellness reduction, as you know, we had a wellness reduction in our budget due to an enrollment decline, and we had an English reduction due to an English decline. We can fill that bridge FTE with our wellness and our cross-certified teacher, and it actually results in a savings to the budget. So again, we could do this all different ways, but in just trying to be very transparent into what has come up as we are looking at certifications, that could work for us and work very, very well. So that is, results in a savings to the budget, $26,123. When we are doing the staffing document, and you have that document in front of you, and we're looking to accommodate our student requests, we saw the need to add back a .2 FTE. We had originally said we could reduce by a .4 FTE in our art technology, but in order to accommodate student requests in technology and art courses, we have added back a .2 FTE, and that's $21,422,000. And then since February 18th, we had a teacher announce a plan to retire. We'd have to replace that FTE, but we could do that at a savings, and the savings would be $26,048. So a lot has happened here since February 18th. When you take all of those costs and all of the savings, it actually doesn't have a significant impact on the budget. It would actually increase the budget by $1,743. it would make our new percentage 0.99%. Any questions on that?
Go ahead.
So the bridge FTE does not require any type of certification or anything?
They have the special ed certification, they are dual
So these teachers have
certified.
the dual certification, so we're covered in that. Okay, the .2 FTE, to accommodate student requests in technology and art. Those are new requests, or this is a change in distribution? In other words, you did not know about these, or you knew, but you weren't going to, and now you're going to accommodate. And we don't have to go into that deep, but we're going to come back to calculus at some point, which kind of relates to the same kind of thing, where I have a question about whether we wait until the very last minute because we need to get the staffing document, because we need to get student requests for their courses. And then it seems as though we honor many of those requests, but some of those requests we say we're not running that, and so therefore you don't get that. So I'm just wondering how that art thing ties in. Was that something that we weren't going to do, but now we are going to do, or whether it was something that we overlooked the numbers, or how that kind of fits in? And then I'll just do the last one so that I don't want to take too much time. The rehiring of the FTE, that's a fluid number, that's an exact number. Many times we do this where we say we think we can hire at a step such and such, and then we come back and we can't hire at a step such and such, and we have to hire at a higher one. So, so we're confident that that's a good number, that we're be okay, and that we're not going to be at risk, that we won't be able to find somebody at that level.
So let's start with that one and go back. That FTE would be hiring at an MA 12, which we're confident that we would be able to find someone at an MA 12. It's replacing a teacher who is MA 30 max, and who is retired. So we're comfortable with that. The FTE in technology and art, let me tell you that the staffing document draft that you have in front of you has already been changed. Numbers shift as students are looking at courses. So you may see a course in that staffing document that's low enrollment. Paula is our go-to person. She is really the one who has the up-to-date. For those of you new to this process, that document is not finalized until the first week of school, because numbers are constantly shifting. When our department chairs, and I'll let JT and Angela speak to the art and technology, as they are looking to sections, and they're looking to say, okay, we think we need this many sections, and we're going to cut this in half, and we could put the 2 sections here. I know Angela has gone into depth in how that work takes place. Remember that our February 18th budget was in the midst of them doing that work. So once they finished that work and said, we think we need an extra 0.2 FTE in order to accommodate those courses, do we have to put it in? No, but you need to understand what are the repercussions if it's not in. And with that, I'll turn it over to either JT or Angela. This is a position that is part in technology, part in art.
So thank you, Gina. And Mike, your question is well received. And the biggest piece of data we have in all this staffing piece is the staffing document. And in February, we weren't at the place where we are now. And I think the board received the staffing document to preview, right? And we have some tough numbers. Every year we kind of make some judgment calls. But I got to say that really the decisions we make are based on that data. And I think as a district or as a school, we're in a really good place because we can make those decisions with some actuality in these numbers. But like Gina said, it's very fluid. I mean, it's a living, breathing thing, the schedule itself. So when you take a look at, there's kind of 2 places to look at. but there's the science and then, or the tech, and then there's the art. We had a reduction that we proposed, but then when we started to actually say if we materialize that reduction, we're going to have some issues in how many seats might be available for students. And we want to have some capacity for that fluidity for kids to be able to move, let's say, into a course like a digital photo or an imaging course or a 2D course. So there's a couple different courses that live, and they kind of live across technology and art. I hope I'm trying to explain like how dynamic that is, and it's interesting because it's it's like departments that Angela and I kind of share, staff too. So it helps us, again, we're trying to go that student choice and that student opportunity to be able to find seats in these courses, right? So we said if we could do that .2, that would help us because essentially it's 2 additional semester-based courses. So 2.1, .1 and a .1 with 2 additional courses. So from our first look at it to our 10th or 15th iteration of that, we feel that this would help with some of that choice that students will have when we actually press the button and try to get that master schedule on.
So if you don't mind me, so we're saying that, can you elaborate a little more on how many students does this affect? If this position was not put in, where would these students be placed? And maybe speak to those points so we can kind of get a better idea.
Right, and that's a really tough number it's almost a range, right? It could be upwards of, 50 plus, or it could be, if it's 2 smaller sections that have 2 sections of 12, for some of these higher level courses, it might just be 20, 24 total, right? So it's hard to say with assurance, okay, it is X number of students. Because, again, once we put those sections in there, and then they are populated with students, that's when we will actually see how many students it will benefit. And, again, those are our judgments, our professional judgment saying, if we put these additional sections in, it will avail students, more students. I can't say how many more, but it will be more.
So the .2 is not just one section?
It would be 2 semester-based sections. One each semester.
One in each semester?
That's right.
So it's still, it's one section, so it's, again, sticking with the half year, it's going to impact more or less 25 students?
Mm-hmm.
And then it would impact them as well in the second semester as well. So
Right.
rather than calling it 50 student, it's in each semester, it's 25 students, right? And if we didn't have that position, those 25 students would be able to find additional course offerings, or they're going to be sitting in a study hall, because those are the things that we
That was
really
our worry.
want to
So
know.
that's what we thought, to be safe, to better accommodate more students into courses and not have the study hall and not be locked out of other courses, that to open up the art and tech. The other subjects are very full because of the cuts in those courses too. So it's just simply to better able serve those students.
So is it fair to say there's not room for them in other courses? It's either this or study hall? Or is that?
There would be less
It's hard
room.
to say
Well,
because
we
this
haven't
is,
pushed
at
the
this
button.
point,
We haven't
we
pushed the
didn't
button
set
to
the
schedule. Yeah.
So
So it's giving you
Once the
some
schedule's
capacity
set,
to have flexibility in the classes.
there
You're
will be
not sure how many
conflicts,
kids are
it's
going
not,
to be in
it's
the
just gonna
classes.
reduce the likelihood of more conflicts, I suppose, right? Because it's not gonna eliminate all conflicts once, that
Same.
if that
No.
student, if that opening in that course is only available period 3, but that student was taking something else period 3, once we set the schedule, that makes it harder. But to add 2 more sections to the overall elective program, if you think of it even beyond art and tech, it's just going to reduce the likelihood of additional conflicts, which is
Your
fine.
staffing document reflects the added .2. So if you looked at the staffing document in technology, and when we get to human resources, we can dig into that more. If we were to remove that .2, you can look to see the difficult task that would be in front, because we would have to pull that out.
So I'm trying to reconcile this ad for technology art with the last time we met on the 18th, where we said, we proposed an art reduction of .4 FTE, right?
Right.
That could impact 40, 50 students that, to Mike and Todd's point, could be sitting in the study hall if we don't find a place for them. So now we're saying essentially we're restoring or proposing to restore half of that exposure from the last time. Okay. And if we wanted to then restore all of it, so we don't have that flex, then that's essentially back, we'll just be adding back the 42,000 from the last
Correct.
time. Okay.
All right?
Okay,
Move on.
Okay, so we're moving on. So this slide, I think will look familiar. This is the slide that was included in that February 18th. These are the clusters that Todd spoke about earlier. The board received a memo from Dr. McMorran giving some more clarity to these, and we'll go through them one by one. The reason you see 4 of these in gray is because those are the ones we have the least control over as we are planning our budget. We don't budget for central office. We are just given an amount. We don't budget for debt management. Outplacement is what is. We can't negotiate transportation. So we'll go through some of those. The other items, we have some ability to look at on our human resources. You could see that in human resources, we are down 27.91%. Academic programming, we're up 2.16%. It's $5,000. And operations, another 2% increase, up 4,000. So we'll go through these one by one so we could dig in and if there are specific questions. We'll start with central office. So this number does not include the $60,000, but it does include the new position of data analyst. And the amount we budget for is 1/3 of the central office costs.
Third of the position went up.
Any questions?
So, can we talk about the data analyst position? Only because I don't want to rehash a central office type discussion. However, I was informed that the data person at central office was going to be in lieu of some of the work we do here in that area. And it seems like it's not. It seems like we're doing the same amount here as we always have, and we're adding central office data person. And so can someone just reassure me that there's no redundancy there, that there's no overlap?
There's no redundancy there, there's no overlap. The work of the data analyst is work that we would like to do and have not been able to. The work of a data analyst is to say, look at all of the fields of data that you're generating, and through analysis, find meaning. Our particular interest is in looking at student performance data, both internally and externally through standardized measurements, and through analysis, getting information back to teams of teachers or individual teachers to say, look, here's how your kids are performing. Look, here's a deficit. Here's a strength. If you changed your input through modifying what you're presenting in the classroom, you could change output. So a big chunk of our interest there is in, through the provision of informed data to help teachers to target and focus the learning to improve student achievement. But we're also interested in financial analysis. That'll take place at central office. That doesn't take place here. We're interested in doing some meta-analysis of teacher evaluations. It is a massive, legally required event that every teacher gets evaluated, some of them multiple times. That generates a field of data that at the current time we simply do not have the capacity to analyze at a group or grade level or metacognitive level. So we want to do that. So the data analyst isn't going to be duplicating work that's already being done. may in fact take some of the tasks that the department chairs or instructional leaders are doing. And the idea and the hope is to focus and reintroduce into the system information about processes, expenditures, student performance, other areas that will let us become more competitive. One of the reasons I've pursued this is so many of our sister districts have people doing this work, or their assistant superintendents for curriculum instruction have teams of people that can look at each of the curricular strands. They have people in charge of world language or math or technology or whatever. We have Stephanie Pearson-Ugal. We want to provide this level of support so that we can focus our attention where we can best do it. It's not going to be something where we're going to say, oh, JT, you no longer need to do part of the work of being a department chair. It'll be complementary to JT's work.
This may have been answered before, and if it were, please excuse me, but what's the salary range for this position right now?
It's about $80,000, and in the field of data analyst, it's right in the middle of the range.
Thank you.
And it was targeted to be comparable to our business manager, our accountant bookkeeper, and our business operations manager, transportation, food service, air quality, other tasks, so that they're all roughly comparable.
Thank you.
So again, the intent for this person is doing data analytics. It's not to come here and help with, fixing, troubleshooting laptops and
Yeah,
hardware and
correct.
technology.
It's not a
So there's
technology
an
support
offset.
position.
Right, no,
So it's
right.
no tech support back to us.
Yeah.
It's all, and
Right.
they get a benefit of data analytics
Right.
coming out of people's roles.
I get that. I guess my concern stems from the fact that it seems like, even from Dr. McMorrin's description, that this task is daunting for what this person is going to be doing. They're talking about financial stuff, they're talking about teacher evaluation, they're talking about, ways to improve it just seems like a daunting task, and I just want to make sure that we're not doing some of the stuff here and therefore will not be benefiting from that data person who will be providing for the other two districts. That's when I say overlap. I want to make sure that, obviously the work is important and we want to do it. I just want to make sure that we're not.
Yeah, I can't imagine any constrictions on the work of this person. He'll be working with and for the director of finance, the assistant superintendent, the superintendent, the administrative leadership team. So one of the concerns you often raise is Barlow going to get its fair third? And the answer is yes. And often you actually get more than that. But this is that category that I realize I'm chafing a little bit here, because we often come up against this 3-district stuff that K-12 districts don't have to talk or think about. So it is, by the way, the bulk of the salary for this position is because we're giving up the receptionist position, who did more than just answering the phone for us. She did other duties. We've distributed those duties among the other secretaries. We did not give them an increase in pay to do it. We're just reallocating how we're getting the work done.
Yeah, I do recall when he talked about this at tri-board, that this was intended to be additive, right, not duplicative. And I think I personally support it to the extent that at least we have someone supporting our administration across all 5 schools and addressing cohesively how curriculum could be tailored to our individual students, and also addressing how they migrate from the elementary schools to the middle schools and the high schools. So I actually do like the idea, because at least you have somebody that's supporting the administration that can kind of keep our eye on, a child from when they come into K and they graduate in 12th grade. I love it. I think it's a great idea, and I think it's worth trying.
All right, let's move to the next one, because that was an easy one, so.
That was an easy one.
Let's go to the next easy one.
The next easy one. Transportation, we say easy. It isn't, none of these are easy, but we don't have a lot of control over this. We've broken down the morning transportation and the afternoon bus runs at over $1 million. Special education transportation, Patty keeps a close eye on this, and there's a range of costs. Again, we don't have much control over that. We have athletics, the next biggest expense in this category. These are all object code 510, by the way, for those of you new to our budget. We do transport students to vocational and agricultural schools. And then we do have some money in our budget for curricular field trips, club travel. This year, with this new first student, we do have some free bus runs that we've been able to utilize. They're free bus runs within the town, right? And so some of our clubs that go to different schools and are traveling within the town, we've been utilizing that, which is, has been taken into account in our budget.
So, how is the 41,000 coming in with these, you have your sub-bullets down here of the different types of transportation. Is this attributable to one area? Is it spread out? Is there any particular area that's increased, or is it just incremental across all these categories that's getting
Some
this up?
special education transportation has.
I think we're the biggest chunk of it. I think I'm almost 30,000 of it.
Okay.
The percent didn't really go up.
Yeah, it's not.
And last year it was flat, right, or down, because it was the new first bus contract, so over 2 years, it's not bad at all.
Yeah.
Question on this, historically, we've had difficulties forecasting athletic transportation at the end of the year. And it seems like, since I've been on the board, every year that line item is challenged. And so the question is, are we in that same position this year? Have we added to that? It seems like every year we're like 20 grand short, or we're 18 grand short, or we're 14, like every year at the end of the year, we come back and we go, oh, it was short. So the question is, are we gonna be short again? Have we taken that into account and adjusted that number, or is it just the same number again and we'll probably be short?
To answer that question, I was very mindful of that going into this budget process, but we've been through, almost completed 2 full seasons, and we're trending much lower. The new bus company and the deal that the board has worked out with them as far as works for athletics has worked very well. Some of the in addition to some of the changes we've made, which is less shuttle buses for various games, grouping teams together that go into the same locations, cutting down on scrimmages that are away. The bus company doesn't charge us from the yard to the school and then from the school back to the yard, so that cuts down at about an hour each trip, which has helped us do that. Obviously, both the ski program as well as the 2 swim programs, they also pay into for their practice transportation. So the combination of a lower hourly rate plus not having to pay for the yard to the school back to the yard has really put us in a really nice range, to the point where I think we're probably going to be, depending on how postseason goes, probably a little under what we have budgeted. And when I say little, I mean about $6,000 to $7,000.
627.
Around there.
Oh, it sounded like 67,000. Wow, yeah.
If it was 67, it should be like
Right.
that. But yeah, that is.
Okay, no, it's good. It wasn't a load, I know you guys are doing your best
I
to
know it was-
be efficient, I just want to make sure we're not
Well, I know
under
it was a concern
budgeting
by the
that.
board, and it was a concern for us too, because, I hate coming here every single year asking for $15,000 or $20,000.
Right.
So, we've been closely monitoring, everything that's going on with the new company, and they've come through and everything they've promised so far. So,
We're also a little bit more responsive in billing, where that was a
and they
problem
actually show
before.
up for everything,
Yeah.
which is also a nice perk.
An added bonus when you actually
Haven't
pay
had to
for the
pick
bus.
anybody up to
Like
gas
our
station
minimum
this
this
Especially
year,
on weekends,
which
when
is
someone's
nice.
calling you at 6:30 in the morning and they're not there, that's a concern.
We hired a good company, I think. They did it.
All right, any other questions on transportation? Otherwise, we're good with that category, we'll move on. All right, next.
Moving on to outplacement, another number we really don't have control over. This is in flux, as you saw with our budget numbers. Patty can explain these different lines, 561, 63, and 64. 564 was that special ed cost adjustment we spoke about earlier. Do you have specific questions that we can answer, knowing we can't get into tremendous amounts of detail?
Yeah, so I have a general question, which is, last year was a very favorable year as far as outplacements, in that we had fewer than expected, or I don't know the best way to, I guess that's probably the best way to say it. And so now we have a 5.28% increase over what we budgeted last year, which,
Sorry, that's not accurate. It's the percent of the total. It's not the percentage increase year to year.
Up to 8%
okay,
of
so,
the
but
total.
then, are we over what we budgeted last year in outplacements?
We're actually, the 2021 proposal is actually about $42,000 less than what the two tuition lines are this year.
Okay,
So we're trending in the right direction again still. The difference all is in that 1211, 564, the one line in the excess cost numbers. And so it's a good thing. I mean,
No, that's-
it's a bad thing that it's going down, but it's a good thing because it means we're not spending that 110,000 upfront and 30 cents on every dollar after that. So that's why overall it's up, but the tuition lines itself are down about 42,000.
No, that's helpful, and that would be a good thing to have on the slide, because I was looking at it like it was up from
Yeah.
over last year. And then, would it be fair to assume these are newer students coming in? And so, can you speak a little bit about the trend? Is the frequency going up? Is it holding the same? Is it going down? And just in the short term, because I know you can't forecast.
We do have the full K-12 picture, so we're able to kind of look a little bit down the road, but again, it's really hard to predict at what point in time a student is ready to start stepping down from services that are outside of the district. I think the easier number for us to predict is that 18 to 21 population. And again, some of the transition programs that our kids participate in are very, very strong programs, and they are very cost-effective for us as a district. And that's one where we will continue to see that's where we have most of the students that were currently at Barlow will be in those 18 to 21 programs next year. That's where we see the biggest movement, and that will be the trend that we'll continue to see for maybe at least into next year, and then that trend will slow down a little bit.
Maybe my question was a little, I was more looking at, is there any concern in the near future for a sizable increase based upon what you see coming down the pipeline?
No,
Okay.
No.
That's great.
I think we will continue to see some incremental drops in the 21-22 school year, and then I think we will see some nice drops in the 23-24 school year.
In both of the middle schools, we are going to be introducing a junior bridges program. So we already have, we call the BASIS program, which is the counterpart to the Triple E here. We are seeking at the elementary middle school to build more internal capacity to provide for students with special needs. And the more we can build internal capacity, obviously the less we need to place students out. It's a quality and cost initiative. How do we help kids stay with us, succeeding in the middle school. We can move them forward into bridges here or into the general population or into Tripoli. And by doing so, have more kids in their own beds at night and their own schools during the day.
We should call it the Roscoe program. So
Name it after.
Get some,
Get a plaque for the room.
something.
Yeah.
It seems to have caught on. It's going on in all the other
It's
schools.
spreading
Everyone's like, well, we're doing bridging. Like, that's the Roscoe.
All right, any other questions in the outplacement category? So we'll move on to the next one. All right, debt management.
We'll let Scott speak mostly to this. This is our debt management. The debt management comprises nearly half of our total increase that we're asking.
Yeah, and this is driven by our debt schedule that's a function of all of the bonding that's occurred over the last 15-plus years. That schedule is laid out at the time the bonds are purchased, and they layer together over time. I think in the last board meeting, I had shared a view of that roll-off schedule of how that's occurring. So this year, 1920 into 2021, we do have an increase, and the aggregate increase is up 116,325K. That is driven by a slight increase in interest payments and a slight increase in the principal that's owed. That increase from this year to next year is the last year in which there would be an increase, short of any new debt that we would raise. Every year after next year, so from 2021 onwards, we see year-on-year reductions in the total amount of principal and interest that's owed.
And if I remember correctly, it's almost that number, isn't it?
Year-on-year, at least.
Like it goes down 116,000 next year, and then it goes down 116 the next year.
At least, in some cases higher than that.
Yeah.
I would have to check it, but I think over the next 3-ish years, it takes, if nothing else were changing the budget, it takes like the equivalent of 6% out of the aggregate cost. So we're lowering our fixed costs that are not variable by anything, just by the roll-off of the debt schedule over the coming years.
So I think probably the one item here is we have from the construction project, the bond premium, that we could potentially apply into this category to pay off earlier some of the interest.
Yeah, it's not to pay earlier, just so we are clear, because I actually clarified this point with bond counsel. We have no flexibility in payment, timing of payment, either for principal or interest. What we can do is we can use those proceeds to make the interest payment as opposed to funding it from the operational budget itself.
But
Okay, so we could reduce the line, sorry, we could reduce the line item in the operational budget for the payment here by using and substituting in the construction project on premium payment in to reduce the overall operating budget using excess.
And that's not yet reflected in
That's,
the
yeah,
numbers.
and that's
you're
not in
talking
this
about,
number.
right?
Not at all.
And what are the other options for that?
For what?
The bond premium from the construction project, what other
Well,
options?
what else
would
could be done with that money? All of the funds up to the amount that was approved at referendum, which was 1,916,000 and change, can be used for a project that is aligned with the resolution that authorized the bonding initiative itself. That comprises the paving work, the sidewalk work, the tennis court work, and the stadium track work. So spending that is in line with those campus improvement projects as defined in the resolution are eligible for monies up to the amount, the dollar amount that was approved. As Todd mentioned, when we sell a bond, we not only get the amount of bond money that we're selling, but we in fact are paid a premium by the buyer. So they're in essence advancing us some money at that point. So we got an incremental, I'd have to get my notes, I have them here, but something on the order of 120K, I think, 105K.
Somewhere in that range.
In additional premium above and beyond. So that takes the total amount of money that we have above the 1,916,000 that was approved, but we cannot spend above the 1,916,000 on the campus improvement projects. That money, by definition, would ultimately have to be paid against bond interest payments at some point. And the advice and guidance from council was you should you should endeavor to undertake the spend down of the additional funds that you have, as quickly as you can. I don't think that there's a set time frame, but
So
you
is
should move
the,
along.
is the advice then to apply the extra bond premium in here and make basically 2 payments in this year? Or
Well, this number
make
that's
one
here.
payment and
so
take it
the-
out of the, save the money in the operational by using the bond premium?
The interest amount that's here, our total interest owed next year is a little over $350,000. That's actually comprised of multiple debt schedules, so there are multiple times throughout the year that we have to pay that. We need to pay those amounts on those days. The only question was, what's the source of those funds? And, our choices are to do it through the operating budget for it in advance, which is what we've traditionally done, or budget less in the operating budget and say we'll pay it out of with a
Portion of
separate
it.
fund that holds the monies from the bond itself.
Yeah, so I guess what makes this somewhat unusual is in the past, we have done a short-term borrow until the project was complete, and then we did a bond for the full amount.
Right.
So if the number was lower, you only borrowed what you needed.
Yes.
In this instance, because we found that it was
Interest rates.
it was more cost-effective to do it, to bond once.
Because the project was
rather
so
than
short.
doing two different.
Because of the short
We
duration.
would have had to
and
have
the
done
interest rates.
2 things in close succession, so the fixed cost of doing it twice didn't make sense to do.
Right.
Typical projects are gonna be over a much, much longer period of
Right,
time.
so then just help me to understand, because it gets somewhat complex, that if we do take the interest or the bond premium and pay the interest, then next year, we're not gonna see the reduction. I mean, it will be there, but it won't be in the budget, so you won't get that reduction next year.
It would just, we will always pay what the debt schedule requires.
No,
So it will.
I understand, but what I'm saying is, if you put that money in the budget, and you paid your interest with that money in the budget, next year, when you're formulating your budget, your interest payments, that number comes down,
Comes
right?
down because the bond
Because of the bond.
repayment schedule comes down,
I got that, but the amount of money that you've allocated for that,
will go down.
yeah, so you're not going to see $116,000 reduction in next year's budget.
No.
Because you've paid that money
No.
out of a different method, so you'll be basically flat or could be up.
It would be down. I mean, it will be down. Oh, I see what you're saying.
You're talking about year over year, like if
Yeah.
you do a
Correct, yeah.
variance of this
I
budget
have
to
the
next
number
year.
here because
right,
I-
It'll appear like an increase in next year's budget. Yeah.
It was
Just so that we're all clear going in, that we know what,
Right, so instead of putting 200 in bond payment, we're putting or instead of 300K, we're putting 200K because we're moving the bond premium.
That said, we likely would have, if we're gonna target the amount of the increase in order to make it a flat year-to-year number, we are likely to have more than that available to us. In other words, the bond premium is 105, but depending on how we spend out the rest of the project itself, there are things in there that we may or may not expend. We already know that the general contractor amount will be slightly less due to change orders. There's contingency, of course, that we built into it that, depending on how the project pans out, we may or may not spend all of. So until all of those numbers are finalized, we won't know exactly what the number is. There's, at a bare minimum, the bond premium amount that we know would be sufficient for this. But we may have additional, in which case we would continue to have excess funds from bonding that should be paid against interest in a future year.
And recommendation is to get, allocate those funds as quickly as possible, because, again, they were approved for the project. But as you know, we limited the scope on the project to the areas of extreme need, and we're going to have more needs in the next year or two. And so, but that's the way
But I
they're
would
saying to
say-
handle it, right? Is
Right,
to
so I'd
do-
say at this point, though, we're not looking at any of the extra cost or any of the savings coming out of the construction project at this point to deal with those dollars right now. That we'll deal with those once we finish the construction project, and what we want to do is those dollars, either use them for other construction or pay down debt. I think the question we have at the moment is, do we use the bond premium to substitute into the budget line?
Well,
Right now, since we know that money is already there, we don't need it for anything in the building project as it stands, because there's still money in the building project. So we can make a decision on what do we do with the bond premium money, I think,
Yeah,
at this
well,
point.
it's not the way I'd like to do it, but it seems like it's the way it's recommended and the way we have to do it. So if we can't do anything else with them, and they're saying you gotta, allocate those right away, and that's what bond council is saying, then I don't know that, I don't know, does anyone else see any other way to do it? I think we have to do it then, right?
It would be a current year item, it wouldn't be a budget item. The only budget item would be just the knock-on impact of perhaps not budgeting it and
Not
then
budgeting it
using
as
it to fund something else, right?
Well, that's a
We
question,
have to
are
make
we,
a decision in
do
this
we-
fiscal year to allocate that excess bond to next year's, interest, is what I understand, right?
well, okay, are we paying any interest this year?
We always pay
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah.
So can we use the money to pay this year's interest?
Yeah.
Yes, but we've already budgeted for this year's interest in this year's budget.
So we'll still have a surplus at the end of the current
Right,
year.
'cause we
So we have to
already
decide,
allocated
even
for this year's
if we don't have it impact next year's budget, we're gonna have to decide as a board what to do with that surplus.
So we will have unspent funds,
Yeah.
but we'll have more flexibility if we paid it this year.
Potentially, and the reason I say potentially is the timing of when we have to make those interest payments is prescribed to us. And without really deeply analyzing that, I couldn't off the top of my head tell you, is that our total interest payments for next year are $367K. Does a lot of that happen in July and August of this coming year, or does a lot of that happen next April and May of next year? I really can't hold money for this year until next April and May.
No,
So I'm just.
I realize that.
Yeah, and I'm just, so it becomes very time sensitive as to when I expend it, and that's given to me. I have to expend it at the time that I have to expend it. I thought actually that we could prepay, so like you prepay your home mortgage type of thing, but, confirmed with bond counsel that you cannot do so.
So is it easy enough to figure out how much interest obligation we have remaining in this fiscal year?
Yeah, not tonight, but yeah.
No, because I think that would be helpful.
Would you like-
Like to know.
All right, so just to summarize, so seeing if what is left in this year, if we apply the bond premium to this year, and if that reduces our overall interest on all the outstanding loans and payments, or if it's more beneficial to reduce the debt management operation line for the bond premium amount for next year and put it into the budget that way. Said that correctly. Is the option that we're looking at.
Yeah, so the open question is, what is the remaining interest payment schedule?
If we
For next
pay,
year.
if we use the bond premium pay in this fiscal year versus reduce the operating line and put it in next year. So that would be one action we'd like to see for the next meeting.
Okay,
See
goes
that,
your
yeah.
budget number tonight.
We could conditionally approve something pending this number.
All right, any other questions on debt management? All right, on to operations.
Okay, so we're now on slide 11, operations. And compared to last year, the percentage of our budget that's going towards operation is 5.79%. It's up $4,890. Walter is here to answer any questions you might have on any of those object codes. They all go into his budget. There are some we don't have control over, like our heating oil and electricity. Maintenance contracts is something Walter has looked at carefully, and over the years, we have pulled out the repair line, so the maintenance contracts, all of those 430 codes are actual numbers that are just for the maintenance contracts and don't include repair lines.
So I have a couple questions. So, number one, snow plowing. Now that we're in the era of
In spring.
climate change, and we don't get snow in the Northeast anymore,
At least not this year.
knocking on
Don't
wood.
jinx us, yeah.
Anyway. Is there any, can you define the risk versus the benefits of having a fixed contract snow plow? Now, I do remember years when we got buried in snow and the poor guy took it on the chin because he was lumped into the, the full year.
That's the quantification of the risk.
Well, it is, but again,
I think the
there's
challenge
been
is
2
no-
years in a row when basically he
So-
just needed a broom, and so I'm
Past
just,
performance is no indicator
well, it's,
Sure.
As
it's,
soon as we cut that line,
it's-
it's gonna snow a lot next year.
it's,
We ended up, a number of years back, going to a fixed contract price, because there were years where we had overruns in excess of 6 figures for snow plowing. They were exceptional, but it did happen. You look back throughout history, I mean, we've been great this year. It's been minimal. I'm sure our plow guy is loving it. I also think about 1968, 1970, 1982, 1997, when we had late April snowstorms, some of them significant. On years where it works and we save money because of the amount of snowstorms, people are really happy. On years like this, I get a lot of criticism for it. It's a crapshoot, it really is. If you balance it out over time, I think we've been safer having a contract price. The one thing I do like about it is we can budget, and we know we're not gonna exceed that if we have money left over. On years where we've had, per storm pricing, those have been kind of rare for us. It's,
I'll add 2 other things to that. I think that having a pre-committed arrangement keeps them focused on our business. So it's not a per event type of a thing where we may be competing with other clients. So that's a bit of an intangible. But one other factor I would add to it is total snowfall is one measure. One of the other things that they do is the overnight freezes because things thawed a little bit, and then there's a bit of runoff, and they've got to salt it down before the buses come in the morning and those kinds of things. So there's service that occurs that's not as visible when we haven't gotten a 6-inch snowfall that would require plowing. So that's in there as well.
well, yeah, and so I wasn't saying get rid of the
Oh, no,
really, it was a
understand.
question to have the discussion and to also be able to hear whether you're pleased with the performance and retention of the person, or the company, it was just meant to get it out there because I have heard it, and, in the climate change, it's important that it's at least discussed. So that was number one. The second part is, I know that, at our last Facilities and Fields Committee meeting, there's at least suggestion of a possibility of a proposal for some sort of a increase in the amenities down at the stadium. And I'm gonna circle back to last year when I asked you the question and you smiled and you said I'm a team member, but it looked like we were really torturing you by taking away that additional maintenance custodian. And so I wonder if you could speak to the impact that's having on the school, because I know a little bit about that, and I think if you're down certain personnel, it could end up costing you more money in the long run. So I just wonder if you could maybe speak to that and how it's impacting operations, maintenance of the school, and whether or not it's, something that we can continue to go without.
I'll tell you the same thing I told you last year. I was not happy giving up the position, but I do work as part of a team, and we make a team decision on what's best for our community and what's best for our students and our education. That being said, the school does not get any smaller when students come out of it. The square footage does not decrease with student population. The amount of work doesn't decrease. Yes, it's had an impact. It has not been extremely adverse to us, but there's definitely an impact to it. I'm currently working with administration and my custodial staffs to find out, that with the viruses now, exactly how much we're covering, and see if we are getting the efficient coverage that we need. I've got a company coming in next week that I've worked with before in the past for our workloading, to see if we can adapt with what we have, continue to try and maintain the standards that we like. Would I like to have that position back? I would love to have it back. Is that what's best personnel-wise for us as a team right now? I need to talk to administration, I need to talk to the rest of the administrative team, and we make that decision, as always, on a whole.
Okay, so if a enhancement to the amenities down at the field was to take place, would you have enough staff to be able to maintain that building as well?
Especially with being off-site, it would be very difficult for me during the sports season when that was in use. My staff currently is, square footage-wise, well over the recommended standards. They're doing a very sound job. They work hard to do it. We're trying to find out where we can improve it. Adding more to what they have, I don't believe I could really comfortably say that I could maintain more than what we have on the staff that I'm currently running.
And I know you probably weren't prepared for this, but what financial impact does that position have?
The reduction in the position last year, excluding everything from central office, which would be healthcare, all that lovely stuff, was probably around 49,000, I want to say 49,000 change for that position, where that person was at that step at the time.
If the position was to come back, could you hire at a lower number, or would it still, is it a skilled position that requires a certain salary?
Some of it is contractual. We do have ranges that we work within. It depends on who's out there. And we always try and hire the best people that we can to perform the work. We like somebody with experience. We look for somebody who has green cleaning certification, somebody who's worked in the environment, somebody who's worked in schools, which is definitely different than any other environment that they work in. A lot of it depends on the pool of people out there. But obviously we don't go out there looking to see if we can hire the most expensive people. We try and hire the
No,
best.
yeah, I wasn't suggesting.
No, I understand. I just, being upfront with you,
Right,
we try not to spend more than we have to, but we need to spend the money to get the right people for the job.
right. Okay, and we're in consortiums for everything else, right? Heating, oil, we do electricity, so there's really no,
We constantly shop our supplies, our vendors, our contractors. A lot of our drivers this year were maintenance contracts and additional maintenance contracts requirements that we just don't have a say in. OSHA mandates some of them, and that's where a lot of our increases came from.
okay. Thank you.
We're going to move off of this slide. I actually was able to get to the debt payment schedule here. Back to the prior discussion about interest payments on bonds.
Trying to make
Trying
us
to get the
happy so
motions
we
in.
get them out of here early.
Trying to do a number tonight.
We have two more scheduled payments, one in April, one in May. The aggregate total is a little over $73,000.
73?
A little over 70.
said we had 105.
105 in bond premium.
Not quite enough to make the payment and get the custodian, no, that's next year, so.
Don't have to fill it in yet. All right, any other
105, so that.
Any other questions on operations?
32. Right, so if we made that,
So operations, we're good on operations? If we want to go back and revisit?
yeah, no, I don't want to revisit, I just want to clarify what Scott said about the payment. There's 105, 73 is left this year, so that leaves like 32, if we were to do it
We're
that
to
way.
pay this year and then 32 to drop off of.
It would leave 32 for consideration, that's all. I don't want to go back unless you want to go back.
No. So we're saying use some of the bond premium to make a payment in this year?
Well, what we were saying is that we would use, this is the hypothesis, excess money from the bond to pay off what we have otherwise budgeted in this year's operating budget. So to the extent that we would pay off $73,000 worth of interest from the bond, that would be $73,000 unexpended from this year's 1920 budget, because we have already allocated all the money in this year's budget for this year's interest payments.
But then we could choose to reallocate to interest payments for the next year's budget, thus reducing the overall budget needed for the future year, right?
You could do that by the whole amount.
Just the 30, right. But,
Well, you could do it with the 105 in bond premium at a bare
Yeah,
minimum for next year.
you could do it that, yeah.
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 But if you did it this year, you could put the 73 into the, either the health
way.
reserve or the
Well, I was just saying we'd have
capital
73 in excess to put the health capital or
or
pension.
pension.
Okay. All right, so we'll move,
Moving on.
we'll come back and talk about that one, I guess, at the end. Let's move on then, if nothing else in operations, and to academic programs.
512 is academic programs. You have the academic expert sitting in front of you. If you have any questions on our object code, our 116, or the curriculum work that takes place in our school, you'll see that 116 object code represented in each department as we are undertaking different curricular projects. Our textbooks, conference and travel software. Any questions that we could clarify or answer for you on any of those object lines? You see, we're up by 2.16. We're up by $5,095. It represents 2.16 of our increment.
So as you might expect, I have a couple of questions. Textbooks is pretty straightforward. We have a cycle for them, and who's getting new textbooks this year?
It would be STEM.
That way he's putting his head down, he doesn't.
I'm just
Find the line for you.
Everybody else is looking around saying, who's getting a textbook?
Who gets the textbooks this year? Yeah.
AP Chem, right?
AP Chem, these are
No,
such expensive.
No, this
These
is.
are chemistry.
No,
Oh,
yeah,
just
this is
chemistry.
chemistry. So the interesting thing is we have two, we use the same textbook across our chemistry and honors chemistry course. AP Chem we bought a few years back. That was very expensive. But this would be for 160 copies across the entire chemistry program. One of the things we're running into now, and this is interesting with the digital piece, we have some students that need to have digital copies. And this book itself is from 2002, and there's no real digital copy out there. And a lot of the supplemental resources are not digital. So when we have a student who might have accommodations for digital, access, we don't have that. So this is a somewhat dated book. It also allows us to align to some of the NGSS, the National Science Standards, as far as alignment. And so that's, I know it's a big ask. I'm sure you guys found it in there, 641. on the 1119, that's the STEM budget there, so that, yeah, that is a big ticket.
Is that all for that one textbook? It was like a $15,300 increase in that line item.
Well, it's 24,000, that'd be 160 copies, and I'm budgeting about $150 per copy. Science and math books are exorbitant as far as what the cost is. There could be ways for us to look at that, but, you know, that would be the ask, is for across the chemistry program.
And the lab component is already addressed as well, right? So that would be, Chem would have a lab, right? So then there's no, this would have the textbooks and whatever lab supplies is also in the budget.
Right, if you take a look at the 611 in STEM, you'll see science supplies, lab activities.
Okay.
That's always been there, and actually we reduced that quite a bit last year, and I've been able to get through there without any, you know, impact to labs. So that's been a good number that's worked for us. So that's consumables.
And we'd still be compliant with the it's the textbook that's not necessarily compliant with the NGSS.
Yeah, you're not
The
beholden
lab's
to
fine.
have to buy things with that textbook. There are some programs that are like that, though, like, okay, if you buy the textbook, you've got to buy their whole lab kit,
Right.
but we wouldn't couple those two. That doesn't-
Okay, so then, question, on what slide should we talk about course offerings, and on what slide will we talk about athletics, because I didn't see it on the slides either. And I also have a question that, I'm curious, I know the RESC's put together like a chart that shows staffing sizes for, based on enrollment, you know, as far as like secretarial and administrative assistants and stuff like that. I'm just curious where we fall in there. I would assume we're right in line with others, but that would be curious if we could get that. That would be somewhat helpful. And then, so let's start with calculus. I went back because I was sure that there was a slide missing from the presentation in February, because there was 19 slides and I didn't see in there anywhere any mention about calculus anywhere. And so you can imagine that I will not get too snarky, but there's an underlying degree of displeasure there, in that I've been asking for a right-sizing plan for 6 years. I've been asking for details, and it just seems like certain things we're out in front of, like Latin, and then certain things just all of a sudden disappear, and the first time I hear about it is when I get emails from parents saying, why is calculus not being offered, and yada, yada, yada. And so I did hear some explanation as to low enrollments and that type of thing. But I do want to circle back to the fact that we need to represent all of our students. And I sit up here and say that I fully support running a Calc BC class with 7 or 8 students in it, because those students need that class in order to get where they're going, okay? And then when I look at calculus and I say, well, so then why wouldn't I run a regular calculus class with 9 students? Does it help those students get where they're going? And so that's the conversation that I would really like to have, because it does kind of offend me a little bit that I get these things that, you know, these emails that say, well, you know, the counselors told my child, you know, calculus not being offered, take stat or something else. And then I've heard the argument that, well, you can take AP, AB calc, but it kind of conflicts with what we're always saying about we don't want students who are sophomores to take AP classes because we want them. We don't want to push students into something that they're not prepared for or they can't handle. And yet now we're saying that we're going to push kids who may not be AP students into an AP class so that they can get the calculus. And I've heard, well, we can give them support and everything, and I know a little bit about APs, and APs are different than regular classes. So I wonder if someone can speak to how this happened, why this happened, what the rationale is behind it, how many students initially wanted it, how many students were told they couldn't have it. Because again, it comes back to that staffing document that we wait for with eager anticipation so that we can determine what kind of classes we have. But what we did with calc, we could have done with those art students and just said, yeah, guess what, take something else because we're not offering art. And so I just want to better understand the thought processes and kind of how we got here. And so if somebody could speak to
Take it
that,
right
would be
to it.
helpful.
But just excuse me 1 second. Because I know you didn't mean to say it with snark, and so I'm not gonna take it with snark. The reason you didn't see any in those slides, 19 slides, that said calculus, is because we're not eliminating the calculus program. We make decisions based on our enrollment, all over the place. There are other courses we're not running. We make those decisions based on what are the students, what's the makeup of the students, where can they go for other offerings. So we didn't anticipate not running calculus. In fact, some years, we've offered 2 sections of calculus at 24 and 24. It just so happens that this year, most of our students are choosing to go into the AP Calc AB, and we offer 2 levels of calculus there, the AB Calc and the BC Calc. Only 12 students selected calculus. So when we look at that number and we have to make decisions of what courses we're going to run, those are our professional conversations. We could add calc back. It would be a cost to the budget. We'll let Paula can also speak about those 12 students. But the reason you didn't see it is because we don't, you saw an overall math decrease, and we didn't anticipate not running calculus. If we would have had, and next year, if we have 25 students that are signed up for calculus, we'll be running calculus. There are some years we haven't run AB calculus, or we've had a lower enrollment. You may recall, because you've been on the board for a while, we used to run physics and AP physics in the same class, just because we didn't have the enrollment to kind of pull them apart. So it's enrollment driven, and it's our professional decision as far as what courses we run and don't run. There are others we dig into that staff document that we're not running because of enrollment. I'll let JT speak specifically to calculus, and then maybe Paula can address those 12 students and where, how our conversations have gone with students and where we're going from there to make sure that the students who want calculus are being given calculus.
Just before we get into that, so how much are we, the removal of that class, what is the cost savings of that?
Would be a section of the teacher. It wasn't, we didn't
The
reduce
removal?
the teacher,
The-
the teacher's
not offering
teaching
the
other.
calculus
We're
class.
just not
Is there-
offering it because we're offering other sections
Right,
of.
so there's no cost savings
No
associated.
cost savings associated
No.
with it. We're not removing the course. It's just where we put the staff. Do we run higher classes in certain areas and lower ones? So, JT.
Well, wait a minute, let's say that the other way. And I do feel that I need to say that maybe I'm incorrect in my understanding, and the board can set me straight. You are a Board of Education, but as you often point out to us, you are also a Board of Finance. And the very clear dual message this team has is put together a budget request that will provide for the school, but you also want it to be as fiscally tight as possible. So we're not denying anybody any course. If the board elects to put calculus into the budget, the board would have to elect to increase the math department by 0.2, because it's a fifth of a teaching assignment. So I think that I'm sympathetic to both the administration and the board, because often they've made 32 chess moves And this decision is impacted by this. There's a whole cascade of decisions in, say, the math department. And from this side, the board member doesn't, has a question that it's basically, explain move 19 to me. So let's go into the thinking behind the calculus offerings. JT?
I don't know if board members have the staffing document, because I kind of want to walk you through my thinking on this and make it visible for the board to kind of see, this is how we do this. And on page 12, you'll see math there for first semester. About halfway down the page, this is also a good introduction for some of the newer board members to see how these staffing documents kind of tell a story. And every one of these numbers in here, if you go to 6521, that's calculus, it says calculus A, that is the regular level calculus that I think we're all talking about. Now, I first want to dispel the myth that we're eliminating calculus. That's not true, right? We actually have 3 levels of calculus that coexist. We have BC Calc, AB, BC AP, BC Calc, which is our highest level. We have AB Calc. We didn't even have that 10 years ago. 10 years ago, that wasn't even a course at Barlow. And that was when we were smaller, that we were getting bigger. And now we have that. And then there's a 3rd level, which is the regular level. So we've actually gone from 2 levels to 3 levels. And there's 3 calculuses by which to choose. If you take a look at that number, it says 12. When I start with these numbers that we receive, from data processing and after all the students have been scheduled, I look at that 12, and that is really problematic. That's exceptionally problematic, in fact, because I know I don't have 24. That's a good number, but 12 is really problematic because I'm going to run that as a singleton, right? And when I park that singleton into the master schedule, now I've got 1 period out of 8 kids have a chance to get that. A senior level course is even more problematic as a singleton, in my experience, because now you have kids who are chasing other singletons in the schedule, and they're going to try to get into that one calculus, but let's say it's period 4. And let's say one of their AP singletons that they want to get is also period 4. They're blocked out. And it might just be for one of the 2 semesters, but then we've got an issue there. So singleton play at a senior level it really gives me angst. That gives me some agita to work through this. So I see that 12, and so the first thing I did was I said, hey, Paula, can you tell me what students we're talking about? What 12 students we're talking about? So we're getting down to the student level detail. We took a look at the 12 students themselves and what they have had concurrent or so far in their program, their math program, because again, most of these are seniors. They're all seniors, actually, looking at that list. And I kind of tasked our instructional leaders in math to say, you know what, let's take a look at, could we increase enrollment in AB? Take a look, AP Calc AB. I've got 38 there. So I see that number. Well, that's better, right? But it's not a nice even, 48, 2 sections of 24. So I see 19 there. I said, could we option some students up? Might we be able to take some of these calculus students and looking at those 12 students, could some kids option up? Would they be able to do it? And counselors started to meet with students, right? Another number I looked at was the BC. So Mike, you had mentioned, we always want on BC. That's that terminal. That's the pinnacle of calculus, right? And it's the pinnacle of our math program. 9 students. Good news is that's actually 11 now. We've gotten some kids who've optioned out of AB up to BC. So again, we've talked about this fluidity, right? And how we're moving these chess pieces around to try to see how can this work and is it the right move for a student, right? And some kids said, you know what, I don't want to do BC, I want to do AB. I'm going to option down because they could handle it. They have the whole profile, they could do it, but they're like, I've got 2 other APs in my schedule. So we're getting at that granularity, right? So we're working on that to tell that story. I just know if I run that 12 is probably going to be an 8. And does the board feel comfortable with a 0.2 FTE in calculus for about $20,000, let's say, for 8 students? I mean, as a per pupil, I think about it with my board member back on. That's a really expensive course to offer. When we still have levels of calculus by which these kids could take, and we could actually concurrently run the AB Calc and calculus together and provide some differentiation there, right? So that's some of the thinking that went into that. We're not eliminating calculus as a course, but we're going to try to realign how we could teach that course with a calculus level and an AB calculus in the same course, right? So there might be different types of assignments, different expectations. It's, for a lot of the calculus students, the regular calculus students, it's really about exposure to calculus, right? They're not beholden to have to take the AP test, right? So that's maybe even more than, you know.
That's helpful, because that's exactly what I was gonna ask, is that why can't we run regular calculus with the Calc AB?
That's a good idea.
And,
But-
I mean, that's what I had written down. I'm
Yeah.
like, so you have 40 students, you have 2 classes of 17, one
Right.
class of 16, it all seems to work. So why are parents screaming that there's no calculus being offered? So that's the question.
Yep.
So what you're saying is calculus is being offered, as it always has been. The only difference is it's a combination class with regular calc and Calc AB. Is
But
that
some- not-
clear,
not-
or is that not?
I don't know if that.
In theory.
It's in theory,
that's-
right?
That's what we want to try to do.
So what has happened, and this is the conversation Paula has had, some of the students that are taking calculus were taking calculus and they weren't so excited about pursuing calculus. So Paula has had conversations with students and can give you the number of students that have opted to go into different APs and AP stats and.
Right, so all 12 of the students who originally selected calc have met with their counselor. The math department so nicely went through and made recommendations as to what they think the best option for each student would be based on their math performance over time. The counselors met with the students, explained where we were with the calc, and this was at the initial stage where we were still looking at what would we ultimately do when we found out where the students fell. So 4 students have expressed interest to really stay with calc or to take an AP stat course even though they don't have prerequisites. We are having admin reviews for any of the students who want to either pursue calc through the AP Calc AB, and provide some back work to help them, and also to do individual, like, contracts for the students. Many of the students that had selected calc have really relatively low performance on their midterm exam in their current math class. We looked at their overall performance. I mean, we've got a number of students who got Ds on the midterm. And traditionally, we see a fallout from calc because kids get in and realize, I really don't have those skills. And so they drop. So the 12 dropping to 8 due to conflicts could ultimately wind up being 6, could be 5. So next week, we are set up for admin reviews, and we know of 4 people who were very upset about having had the conversation with their counselors. And we are going to work to accommodate, much like we do with AP French and French 6. We run those concurrently. So we'll look at how would that work. The teacher that's teaching AP Calc AB also has taught calculus. So he knows the curriculum. So that's kind of where we're at. We also met with the students that the math department felt would be well-suited for the BC, and 2 students chose to take that as an option. And other kids said, nope, my load is high, I have 2 or 3 other APs, I'm comfortable in the BC, so that's where we're at.
Thank you. I'm a little more confused. So is any student being told they can't take calculus, regular calculus? If a student wants to take regular calculus, is there any student that's being told either, no, we're not offering it, or you need to go through an administrative review to see if we can get you into the AB one? Is there because it sounded like we were just talking about the regular calc could be run in the same class as the AB, but now it sounds to me like you gotta go through the administrative review to get into the AB, and that there are some kids who may want to take regular calc that we're not offering it. So that's
I guess I
my
need
clarification.
guidance from you on the board. If 3 students say, I want to take regular calculus, we would want you to direct the math department chair, the STEM chair, to run a class of regular calculus with 3 kids in it.
That's not what we're saying here. We're talking
Well,
about
but if-
12 students that could be, 8, that could be 4,
If
and
there's,
whether or not we're giving them
They're
opportunities.
not gonna say to a kid, they're gonna say, here's how you can take calculus, you can go through the review process and come into the period where AP, Calc AB is being taught, and if the kid says, I don't wanna do that, I wanna be in standalone calculus, then that kid wouldn't have a standalone calculus class.
Can I be a little more transparent?
Is that what's happening?
Because when we directed the school counselors to meet with these students, we said that calculus was not running. And we gave them the recommendation of the math department. When we got the responses, the counselors all came to me and said, I have this student who really wants calc, what are we going to do? But the students had already been told that calc wasn't running. We then met and said, how can we accommodate this differently? We then tried to get creative. So to your question, if you want a direct answer, yes, students were told calculus was not running. That's a yes. Then counselors came, we met, and now we're coming up with how can we accommodate the students. Most of the kids were like, okay, yeah, I'm going to take AP Stat, now I'm going to take personal finance or a full year of statistics, which are okay options for some of those students, and then some kids really still wanted the calc, and so we said, we need to figure this out. How can we offer this?
And we're looking to use admin review as that vehicle, as that process for us as a team to say, in mass, let's take a look at all the students that want to do that, let's apply that consistent approach so that we can say, okay, how are we going to handle this? I mean, the reality is, we're in March right now, talking about August, right? So I think, it's very premature for us to say, oh, this isn't happening at all. I mean, this is part of what the workshop is all about, is for us to work this out and for the board to give us guidance if we do run this, But we have a way we think that will work and will be adequate for students to achieve a 4th year of math, and that being calculus. We also have an issue with students when they're concurrently in an AP course. If a student takes an AP course, there's an agreement that they sign that they do take the AP test. Now, if we put a student into a course like that, do we option them out of that requirement, right? Because that presents then a larger question for the admin team to say, oh, are we flexing that away?
No,
So
you're right.
that presents us a little bit of an issue. No, I just want to be clear, like, that's an issue. So if we start to bring students in that aren't taking the AP into an AP course, even though they're concurrently in another level, but where they're in that same classroom, then there seems to be an impropriety. Oh, wait, we've always required students to take the AP test, right? So that's another.
Isn't there a way to break it down like what we're suggesting with Latin is you can take Latin 1, 2, 3, and 4 in one class, right? But we don't make the Latin 1 kids take the Latin 4 test, right? So, I mean,
Right.
Isn't there a way that you could say this is a calculus class and X number of kids are in AP, AB, and X number of kids are just in calculus. And so they don't have to take the AP test because they're not in the AP, they're in the regular calculus class that's being So, again, I'm just trying to understand.
Just to provide context, I do remember this from a curriculum committee perspective that when the curriculum committee looked at the projected class size before the staffing document of what was being offered, it was presented to the committee, and then the committee then presented to the board. We probably talked about it for 30 seconds, so it's fair, we probably should have communicated better, that there was a possibility that due to interest, that we may have to compress some calculus classes. The 2 families reached out to me, probably the same families that reached out to you, with concerns about calculus. I explained exactly that process, that it was never presented to the board in the context of a budget cut per se. So that's why it wasn't in that February 18th slide deck. That said, like any other class, the year we haven't run stagecraft in 3 or 4 years. The year we had to compress, we're not running ceramics. We're issuing with Lat. To me, that it's not necessarily we're targeting programs. This is just part of our normal process, and I think perhaps there's just a misunderstanding. And I think, in terms of people interpreting that, and ultimately, to the earlier comment, I don't even remember who made it, it's up to us to be able to say, okay, well, of these singleton classes, which ones do we want to preserve? Because we may not be able to preserve all of them if we have Latin that's got 5 kids, and, calculus that has 3, and art that has, 5, and they're all painful. But, maybe we can, instead of deliberating on what people did or didn't understand, maybe we can just find a path forward. I mean, one possible option, I don't know, throwing this out there, is we mentioned that there's a lot of cross-certification teachers. I'm not saying that a technology teacher can teach calculus, but if we, you know, say that we need .4 art, we want to cut, right? We're bringing back potentially .2. If you've got a cross-certified teacher that can cover a calculus class, and I'm making this up, or Latin, or art, then let's put them on it, because then we've got .2 we're adding, and we're back to a .4. So let's move forward with trying to come up with stuff like that, instead of trying to remember what somebody probably just didn't understand. I mean, I get confused about it, and I've spent a lot of time reading this, so, but I do, and we explain that to the parents. I think in defense of those parents, they're concerned that their kids are going to be taxed. So I think, you know, it's a fair point to ask about how we can qualitatively deliver. If they do want to have a calculus program, then how can we deliver that without burdening the kids? Because then we're back to, okay, then they're going to end up in guidance counseling because they're stressed out, or they'll get a 504 because they have too many AP classes in their junior year.
But I guess as,
You know?
but I guess as a board though, directionally, are we
You know?
wanting to say, we want calculus A in the program, figure a way to do it? Because right now, calculus A is out of the program for this year.
That's right.
So directionally, do we want them to offer it and figure a way to make it happen, or leave it out, I think is the question
Well,
that
see-
we need to answer.
But it's
Right.
not so stark to me, Scott, Todd. It's not so stark. It seems to me that we have a decreasing number of students anyway who are looking for this. And it also seems to me to be a messaging problem. There is an availability of calculus. The student who wants calculus may have to do a little stretching. If they're not prepared to do the stretching, then maybe they're going to elect another class. So the standard is actually being raised for the student. And that's a messaging problem. It's not that it's not there. That's just how I see it.
I see, you have declining enrollment. And we started with a presentation where the equivalent of 4.7 teachers came out of this faculty. People translate into dollars. So we are going to go through these touch points where the board, the administrators are going to have to say, we can schedule 46 math classes. And then all of the touch points are the ones you're going to hear about. But one of the things that we're not doing and are not interested in doing is saying, in order to run a class of 5 kids, we're going to run a class somewhere else with 30 kids, or more than 30 kids. It's a very complex balancing act. And I've got to put my faith in the department chairs to be coming up with the most advantageous and the least disadvantageous schedule. But even with all that, you're going to have these. You go to page 3, and we had 9 requests for music theory and 5 requests for AP music theory. We're going to run AP with 14 kids in it, AP music theory. All 9 of those kids came over to the AP because what we can't do is say, well, let's just create another section, because every time you create a section, you're either taking it somewhere else, taking from somewhere else, or adding to staff. And if we can't add to staff, and we can't take it from somewhere else, you're going to have some of these contact points. And with respect, I don't think that department chairs can write a daily memo to the members of the Board of Ed saying, hey, it's turned out that this particular class is no longer viable, or we see this number, but our experience tells us that 12 is going to turn into 6. And you have some others that we're going to run a little bit low because we know in the fall kids are going to be transferring up or over. So I've got to put my faith in these guys to be doing their very best job to run the largest number of offerings to meet the widest number of needs within the constraints of time and money.
When, in the past, when we ran physics and AP physics concurrently, how was it possible to have those kids who were just doing physics not take the APs without a conflict in the room?
They actually met for more time, so the physics class, all the students for the first quarter took the 7 periods, the 6 days for a single period, and then the other day for the lab period, or 5 days and then one with the lab. For the second and the third quarter, those students who are in the AP program actually met during all of their study hall periods, the period when they had their lab. So they were actually required to come additional time to do additional coursework. And then they did that in the fourth quarter up until they took the AP exam, and then they returned to their schedule of just attending the class when the physics students attended. That was actually the honors physics class, and that was before it went to the physics class that we have, the AP physics class that we have now. And that's when we discontinued honors physics, and we now just have physics in the AP level. But they actually, to be in that course, had to come to class for additional class periods.
It's not sort of not a protocol you could necessarily follow with calc, it sounds like. Because to me, that's certainly the most appealing option, is to allow those kids to take the class, but with different exams and expectations. I also, it was in the January 28th presentation, where there were the right sizing options and the programmatic change options, and on the right sizing math, it does say that calculus may not be offered. And I will admit that I did not notice that on January 28th either. But I know you guys are struggling with really difficult numbers. I wish we could put them together.
I'm good for it.
I'll just throw something out there, just to brainstorm here. If we added one FTE, and this is hard to have a collective group answer, where would the administration put it, and in what class and why?
Are you talking about somebody who is Latin,
No,
and
just,
calculum sort
we're
of?
prioritizing, we have about, I guess,
A
at
wizard.
least 6 individual courses that have this enrollment problem. And they're all capstone kids that are interested and are targeted, they're really engaged, and it just killed me to have to talk about cutting these or not offering in a given year. So if the board says, let's restore one FTE, what would we choose? Would we choose?
Well, can they
Or
carve,
use
can
it,
they,
I
they'd
really
have to
get
carve it up.
concerned,
Can-
when you look at the staffing document,
Yeah.
and I want to go to Angela's department and say, social studies, those numbers, we have courses that we are not going to run because of relatively low enrollment, and we're able to put kids in other places, but I think those numbers are tight. I don't know if we need one person for one department. I'd be much more interested in the pieces of people. Remember when we did that right sizing, we talked about that this is difficult. When we remove parts of FTEs, it brings a budget number down, but it makes it very difficult to staff. And I think that these people have done just an incredible job in trying to staff for what we have.
So
And those
sorry,
are
I'm
those
just going to
decisions.
bring us back to the discussion on calculus A and what we want to do, because I know we need to move on to Latin and some others that we need to talk about. So right now, calculus A is not in. So from a board direction perspective, what would we like to direct them to do?
So, again, my question, and first of all, lots of comments are being made. We highly value the fine work that you do. I mean, that's ridiculous, okay? But when 12 students are not going to be able to take a course that has been traditionally offered, board members are going to get questions. So obviously, those questions are going to come back to you. I hope you don't take offense, but it is our mission to try and provide our students with what they have traditionally, the options and the offerings that they have been available, historically. So that's what the goal here is. Obviously, if you have one student in a class, we can't run a class for one student. That's ridiculous.
Okay, but we
So,
have 0
no, I'm
students in
going there.
calculus.
I'm going there. So we started out with this, and then it seemed like there was a way to give regular calc students regular calc and have calc AB also run concurrently. If that's an option, that's something that I would very much be in favor of. If it's not going to have a negative impact on the greater, enrollment, then I would be in favor of that. If it's just can't happen, then again, I just would like to be able to articulate why, And again, I do kind of, we get kind of in the weeds when we start talking about the administrative reviews and the kids and the, going into, because that gets really complicated. I just want to know whether a regular kid that wants to take calc can take calc, or whether we're recommending they do something else this year. And that's really the question on the table.
Or do we have a regular kid per se, or do we have kids who
We had
might-
12 of them.
But what I'm hearing from them, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that these are 12 kids that have fallen to 8 kids because 4 of them have been shifted. Is that correct?
We still had 12. When we referred to the 8, we're referring to schedule conflicts because of the singleton and because of the nature that it's a senior level course.
Okay.
That's a potential, that's not a hard number.
So the
But we-
conflict is not per se because it's calculus, it's just because of the nature of where the chips are falling.
Exactly, and it's because it's a senior, there's a lot of singletons that fall.
Which is why Paula met with all 12 students. So all 12 students have a plan. Some are waiting for our administrative review process, which is complex, and that will be individual and personalized to meet their needs.
And I would just add that the value of the admin review is we have students who don't have prerequisite courses for, say, AP Stat. They planned their program thinking they were going to wind up at calculus. Can we work through that, not having the prereq? It is cleaner for us to have documented a process and to take each student individually and come up with the best plan to accommodate their request for a math. If that is that 3 students go into AP Calc AB and take it as calculus without taking the AP exam, that can all be decided through admin review. So I think that we really owe it to the students to be sure we're doing what's in their best interest. And we use that admin review process for many exceptions to really see if it's the right way to go.
I'm going to go back to the board. So the question we'd like them to answer is, if we restore calc, is it possible to do that with the calc AB, however you can figure out, and come back to us next time, or is that something you can answer right now? Otherwise, right now we have on the table, there's no calc.
We can't answer that till the budget's passed and we have a schedule.
Well,
I mean, in terms of if it's going to work.
if it's going to work for those students, but I think what I hear you saying is, if the board directed us to add calculus back
In,
how would we
how would
do
you
it?
do it?
So in our brainstorming
Yes.
of how we would do it, it's very similar to what Cheryl shared with you. We would have our art tech person, this is one way to do it, our art tech person come back to full-time, because we've already restored point 2. We would restore the other point 2. That person cannot teach calculus. However, the person can pick up one of those art tech courses, and one of our tech people that's teaching that has taught calculus. It's might not work as cleanly as JT would like it to work, and it might require a lot of shifting. But there is a way to get a point 2 person to come back. You could also direct us to remove another math course, and we can use the personnel that we have. But right now, the staffing document you have reflects not having a separate calculus teacher.
So by adding the point 2, just to recap, by adding the point 2, it will benefit calculus and art students.
No,
Tech students.
not at all. We would take the point 2, and that person could pick up a tech course, which is then the teacher that's teaching that tech course has a math certification, has taught calculus before. So that teacher could then go and pick up a calculus course.
So then we still have those potentially displaced 20 kids
It doesn't do
in
anything
technology.
with those students.
But I would also caution the board too, we're looking at a number between 0 and 12. So let's say the board's decision is to say, we want calculus. You're buying anywhere between 0 to 12. My confidence on 12 is very low right now. And given the work we've done at the student level to identify these 12 students, if I gave the number of 4, would you be comfortable with that? And 4 that we can work with through the admin review process. I want to be honest. I mean, that's a big number to to add a .2 it's a lot, you know? And I don't know that it would get you the calculus that you had. Like, last year, I think I had numbers, I had 2 sections of calculus, and I had numbers in like 30, and what happened was, as the year went through, I had one section of 12 and one section of 13. I mean, that's not an efficient use of staffing, you know? And there's no way to cut that, you know? And we've done it too, where we've tried to consolidate and try to get to one section, but then the singleton blocks us out. So, so again, we're trying to use what resources we have from the staffing perspective. And again, I asked the question, 0 to 12. Are you comfortable with 12? What if it's 10? What if it's 9? What if it's 4? Right? And the current projections we have, it could be like that, you know? And I just, but again, that's the board's purview. And, but I can't let you think it's going to be 12. I mean, we got to woo those kids back. And even it could be halfway through the year, some of those kids drop out of calculus, and then we have 6, you know?
Well, I know we
So
have to move on, and I'm
yeah,
having
we just
difficulty
need
with this,
to-
so I'm just gonna say, that as an individual board member, I say find a way to offer calculus to all our students. That's, whether you combine them in a class, or what you do, or whatever, I just think, find a way. That's me, because I'm trying to find a
Calculus A,
creative way
calculus A, or
to
any
do it
calculus?
so that it's
No,
not impactful, and we're just going round and around and around,
but
so
calculus
my
A or
opinion
any
is
calculus?
So what some
calculus
schools,
A should be offered.
so what some high schools would
Student
do
wants it.
is they would say, we're going to take the 30 strongest students and put them in Calc AB. We're going to take the other 8 kids and say, you can't take Calc AB, you got to take regular Calc to bring that number up. So that's obviously something you're not going to. There's a problem here that's good. We're having this problem because the math program got to a point where 34 kids said, I'm opting for AP Calc AB, right? If we wouldn't have this conversation at all if
Right.
the requests were 25 for calculus.
Right.
So I think the kid who says, I want to major in a field that would benefit from me having high school calculus, to me, the answer is try the AP course. Or come into the AB course with an academic review.
And that's, what I wanted to clarify was that what I'm hearing you say is that if when it all boils down and settles down, you know what your schedule is, that those kids who might still not be ready for AP through an academic review process could sit in on that class and have a version of regular Calc.
That's what we're saying, just
Yeah.
find a way, because what
Without
happens to the kid
adding
who
the
takes
0.2
AP,
to
AB,
absorb
and gets a C+ on his
I
first
think
test
that
and
we need
wants
to
out?
leave it in the hands
What do you
of
do
these
with him or her? Where do they go? That, you know?
Pull your stat, yeah, there's, you know?
So,
But it's pretty rare that we have that cascade, that off-ramp, I call it, you know?
Yeah, I think more on pre-calc.
Yeah, more pre-calc, we see that.
And even after the administrative review, if all 12 kids wanted to take calculus, they could go into calculus AB, right?
We have
Be able to
38,
accommodate, yeah.
and you add 12, you have 50, 2 sections at 25. So you could, we
Running
will
with 27 this
revisit
year.
every single one of these students and let them know that that's where we're at.
But just to be clear, that was where we were at the beginning of this conversation.
Exactly.
no,
So we
weren't.
had a 20-minute
No, no,
conversation to
no,
get back to where
no,
we were from the
weren't.
beginning.
No, we weren't.
Yes, we were.
No, we weren't.
Anyway,
Well, that's where we are
Well, we're here now,
There.
and it's a good place.
We were at, you
Alright,
could
but-
take
so
AP,
clearly though,
AB,
what-
and
Just so we're clear on the
if you
direction.
got in, yeah.
That we're asking
With the administrative
again
review.
is,
We're not telling them to do anything different.
leave it the way it is right now.
correct.
The kids can still take calculus. It's just in an AB class.
That's correct.
if they're
So we're
taking
not saying
calculus.
So we're not
retard
running calculus A.
It's
It's
not a
calc-
separate calculus.
Right, well, calculus A is
It's combined
zero down
in
here.
the
yeah.
AB.
It's a
Right.
different class.
So we're saying
Should they
not
wanna
restore
take
calculus A, which is what they have on the table right now.
And we're emphasizing that calculus is available to the student. It is just calculus AB.
Yes.
An
And
AP
we're not
class.
eliminating a course. If next year we have 24 students, calculus is on the table. It is not a
Right, it's
course.
not
And then
gone
the
forever.
administration is considering whether or not every student who takes Calc AB is going to be required to take the AP exam. That's what I understand.
Administrative review.
Administrative review.
Yeah, but they wouldn't get the
No, they're
AP,
all-
they wouldn't get
They
AP
wouldn't
on
get
their
AP
transcript.
credit.
if they don't
get
take-
credit for
If they don't,
calculus.
but there could be some way through
So there'd
administrative
be
review that they
calculus
have
A
that.
kids in an AP Calc AB class.
But then you're back to what I said, you keep going back and forth and changing it.
It's exactly what everybody has said. You take two codes, calculus and calculus AP, AB, and they're in the same period, and the teacher has two rosters. That's how
And
we
we're
do
doing
it.
that, so any kid who wants to take calculus can take calculus.
Of the
Without
12,
an
yeah.
administrative review or whatever, you can get calculus if you want.
We are taking it through an administrative review.
But not if we're doing this, we won't admin review any of them. The admin review was because we were doing something without
We're trying
prerequisites.
to meet the individual needs
Right.
of students. So if you would like to direct us to just take
I got
all
it.
of those students and put them in AB, that is not our original plan, was to meet with each student and have an individual plan with those 4 students. If you'd like to direct us, combine those.
I want us to, we have a process, there's a gateway, there's a pathway.
Follow your path.
Yeah, just figure out.
Of what we're doing, which is the admin review.
So, stay the course, I think is what we're saying. All right. Can we move on to Latin?
We can definitely.
I think we do need some discussion around Latin. So,
So the-
it says a reminder of where we're at right now in this
Reminder
budget.
of where we are at, our Latin enrollment numbers are lower. We, are concerned, I guess it's a two-prong. If we have the current 8th graders coming up to Latin, what we heard as a direction from the board, and please correct us if we're wrong, is once students are in a program, you'd like us to continue the program to see it through. So we would want to see the students that are currently in our high school program continue, and we have a plan for that to happen. It would be at that combined level of Latin. If we bring the 9th grader, the rising 9th graders in, we would commit then for Latin to continue longer. So if you go back to the staffing document, and I could pull it up, but the grid that we had with the discontinuation of Latin, we would have to push that out longer if we allowed 9th grade class, the current 9th, I'm so sorry, the current 8th graders to come into Latin in 9th grade. Would we stay committed to those students? And there are, Paula, 4 students. So at some point, we'd be teaching Latin to 4 students in 3 years from now. If we just stayed with the students we have, we're dealing with 14 students, I'm not looking at the number, 14 students. We would continue offering Latin to those 14 students in a combined level. Go back to what JT shared a moment ago with singletons. We would be prepared to say if students couldn't get into Latin and they were going into their senior year and they wanted to continue in that language, we would do what we're doing this year. We have students conflicted out of Latin. We have them working on an independent study and continuing in Latin. So that is where we are looking to the board for direction. Do we open Latin to our rising 9th graders?
Sorry,
If
on
you
the
look on the
staffing, yeah,
staffing
is it page
document-
5 or
Page
page
five.
6?
Yeah.
Page 5?
If you, I'm sorry, if you look on the staffing document, page 5,
First and second.
First and second.
and you will see many arrows
Yep.
because we combine our courses, and you'll see a question mark. So I'm looking down at the Latin numbers. You could see, if you look at Latin 4-3, it's the 2-5 section, you'll see a number 4 with a question mark. Those 4 are our rising 9th graders. And then what you'll see with the arrows is moving our Latin 3 combination into our Latin 4. And we have 1 student in Latin 5. So we can have a class of 14 students. And if we added those 4 from Latin 2, we'd have a class of 18. But it would be 1 section.
So
So one question, when we last spoke on February 18th, and correct me if I don't have this right, I thought we were proposing to have those rising freshmen be in that combined class of 18 students. Is that now not the case?
No, we could definitely do that. It is
Okay.
just up to discussion. If we go that route, and the reason we separated it out
Yep.
is, again, for the board to decide, we would be committing to those 4 students for 4 years of high school. Because we wouldn't anticipate Latin continuing.
Gina, are these the last cohort that's had it at John Reed?
Yes.
Yeah.
There are 13 in that cohort, and 4 went on.
And this staffing document still has the .2 FTE reduction for virtual lang, right? Because we have that shared staffing situation, right?
Yep,
So
and if
then-
you go right down to the bottom, you'll see virtual language, 23 students signed up. So that's 1 course of virtual language.
So if possible, if we were to say, offer to the rising freshmen, you can join the combined classes with Latin, but then ultimately, if the numbers, as seniors graduate, we're gonna have the 4 kids, right? Is that gonna happen in their junior year, in their senior year, and can they pivot to world language, virtual lang at that point?
When you're looking at those numbers, if I'm looking at my 9, so I'm looking down, if you look down at the 4-3-4-1 and 4-4-4-1, Latin 4, those combination courses, the number 1 there is 1 senior. Am I correct, Paula? The 4 represents their junior. They're
all juniors.
They're all juniors.
The 2 and the 7's 9
And then
current
the 9
freshmen.
are sophomores.
For next year.
For next year. They're current freshmen, gonna be sophomores, right?
So then at some point, when the juniors and seniors, rising juniors and seniors leave, we have, Julia just said, the 9 that are currently they're sophomores, rising sophomores, plus the 4 incoming freshmen. So in that year, we'll have 13 kids taking, assuming they continue, right?
Right.
And that would be potentially shared staff with virtual lang.
Virtual language, just take that,
That's
virtual
not gonna
language
help
is not
one-
part of Latin, it happens to be the same.
No, but I mean, it's the same person teaching, right? So theoretically, we still have that same person, so then we don't disadvantage either the Latin kids or the virtual lang kids by having the same person teach it until the program ends, and then at that point, in that year where all the Latin kids graduate, we don't know, JRMS doesn't offer it, Barlow would then terminate the program, and then we have to figure out how to staff virtual lang in whatever languages we have at the time to meet the graduation requirements, right? And that's kind of what I'm thinking of, to be able to have at least a logical sunset where the families that have Latin or virtual lang for that matter say, okay, here's how I can plan, and, I got younger kids, here's what they're gonna do when they go to Barlow. I don't know if that's feasible.
I guess I don't know, because here's what I don't know. I believe that the Easton kids, the Helen Keller kids have said, I can't take Latin because the Reading kids have. I can't come as a 9th grader into Latin 2, so I'm just never gonna exercise that option from the Easton side of the world. I don't know what happens to the requests when it's a level playing field. It could be that you go through, as long as we're doing the very good thing of trying to build your programming off of student interest and request, unless you're gonna say, starting in the following school year, we're gonna just remove Latin as an option going forward, you wouldn't know how many potential current 7th graders as rising 9th graders would be interested in Latin. But the other thing that I think I gotta point out is, we're running one section of virtual language because only 23 kids signed for it. We have currently this year, I think we have about 44 kids or so taking. So it could be that when you go through this cycle again, you go, oh wait, we can run 2 sections of virtual language again. It's one of the uncertainties that you just don't know. It looks like your feeder system will that kids will be going into Spanish or French, but I can't say for sure that there wouldn't be a different view of the world on the eastern side.
So I guess for me, the question is, do we do away with the entire program, sunset the current kids, and not allow the new kids coming in? I think those are basically the options that we're looking at, that we need to give direction, because we just keep talking about Latin year over year over year,
No,
and we need to make a decision.
We do, we do.
And if we're bringing 4 new kids in, we're gonna keep the program going, because we're not gonna wanna sunset the program on them, right? So we're just perpetuating the problem. So I think we just need to make a decision and give some direction back. Do we remove the entire program? Do we not let the 4 kids coming in and sunset the rest of them?
So, the question that I would have first is, what is the professional educator's view of the type of language, world language program we should have at Barlow? Should we be Spanish, French only? Are we heading towards, because there were years I was on this board and everyone started talking about Mandarin. We should be offering Mandarin. Everybody's got Mandarin, right? When I was in high school, I don't know, there was Japanese. Everybody was going to learn Japanese because we were, you know. So the question is, obviously our K-8 schools are now producing Spanish learners because that's what they're immersed with, K-8, and, you know, you do what you know, right? So a kid comes in, is going to take the language that they're already exposed to. So are we comfortable at some point Barlow will just offer Spanish? Or is that unacceptable? Do we need to have offerings? Is the future of world language that everyone's doing a Rosetta Stone language of their choice with, you know, a supervised instructor and self-learning? I think that's the question, because I think today it's Latin, tomorrow it's going to be French, because these kids are coming in immersed with Spanish, and the same thing is going to happen to French. It's going to go kaboom, right? Because I'm looking at this now, and it says French 1, and oh, surprise, 10 kids, and they're all going to be thrown into the French 2 class, right? So it's the same dilemma, right? So what are we doing? What is our vision for Latin? Is it our opinion that Latin is an antiquated language that really has no value at this point? Because I differ from that view. Is it based simply on the numbers?
Who has ever advanced that view? What person here has advanced the view that Latin isn't of value?
I didn't say you did. I said, is it our view? Is it our view?
And I gotta say, I wish Dr. Pearson-Ugal were here, because I haven't read the research from the American Council of Foreign Language Teachers, ACTFL, but I seem to recall in a presentation that their research was, regardless of the second language the child was studying from elementary school, it did not have an adverse impact on choice once kids got into middle school and could choose between Latin or French. I think we're seeing the decline in French because we're seeing the decline in enrollment. I think we could stipulate that we value Latin. If you're putting to the question of the teachers, what languages would we like to offer? Well, I'll get mine in for German. You know, we used to offer German here, and we don't anymore. I think it's a question of, again, right now you're looking at either 14 or 18 kids. So I really got to say that there has been no secret conversation where we said, what can we do to kill off Latin? If 20 kids had signed up for Latin, we'd be running Latin. I mean, it's unfortunate that because of certification and what happened at John Reed that we had to restrict the offering to 8th grade. But I want to come back again to the reason you have this low number in Latin is because John Reed offered Latin and Helen Keller didn't. If we could double these numbers based simply on both schools feeding into the high school, you'd be talking about 28 kids or more. So I like the idea of how are we offering world language. We would love to offer more than just French or Spanish or Latin. There are other languages we'd like to explore. And by the way, the conversation we're having about Latin, when I brought this up with some of my counterparts, they said, oh, this is the conversation we're having about Mandarin, because they were using, there's a limited number of certified people, and the government of China was sending people over in 2-year cycles, and they're not doing that anymore. So there are kids that are trapped in a multi-year of Mandarin, and now they're in high school, and they're the teachers to do it.
Right. So Helen Keller's never offered Latin.
Right.
And we have historically, if you go back 5, 6, 7 years, we've had 60 Latin students. It's like every year. So I don't know that, that's the factor.
Yeah, we have. And
60, yes.
You go back
Like
far
past
enough.
5 years, a long time ago, before you were here,
Yeah.
yeah. You have to go back more than that.
Back more than what, 5 years?
Definitely more than 5. I actually don't know the enrollment before.
No, it was in
I
the
have-
60s back in, well, the other end of this decade.
Right, but we're at 18 students now that we need to deal with. So,
And that's fine. So we know that if we're sunsetting this language, okay, the question that I had was, is there something that's going to rise in the ashes, or whether this is just something that's happened because of declining enrollment, and we're just going to, it's okay. We can have Spanish and French, and we're okay with that. It was a very simple question. It's not loaded. The other part is, what do you do now that you have so few students? And so my question would be, do we have an obligation to the students who are in this school who have taken Latin previously to allow them to finish Latin? And if the answer is yes, then the question is,
Who are you asking
why,
that question to, though?
why
To
do
the
we not
board or
have,
to who's the question to?
it's for the
For the
floor.
board.
It's
Okay,
for the
for the
floor.
board. All right.
Okay? If we have that obligation, then we don't have the obligation to the students who are in our school district who have taken Latin in middle school but haven't yet stepped foot into Barlow. We don't have the same obligation. Because it seems to me either we, are 3 districts, separate districts, or we're 3 that work as one, or however we want to phrase it. So either we do have an obligation or we don't. I think it's the same, whether they're here yet or not.
I don't know if we have I wouldn't phrase it as an obligation. I don't know if we have an obligation to offer any of the courses. It's what we choose to put out there.
Okay.
I think what we have to, again, decide tonight is, what are we doing with, right now, the proposals, putting them all together in one class and bringing 4 new people in. So if the board is okay with that, then we move forward with that. If we're not okay with that, we need to give direction
I
on
want a
what we want to
clarifying
do.
question, if I could have it, and I think I know the answer. This cohort of 4 is the last cohort coming through John Reed. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
In the interest of moving forward, I would offer up to the board for consideration honoring the existing students at Barlow. This would be the, whatever number is, sorry, I lost that number.
14.
The 14.
14.
And then offering up to those 4 students self-selected Latin as long as it's offered. So when the people who came before them graduate, they're gonna have to change the course. And to me, that's a compromise. That may not be what any of us want, but at least it moves the discussion forward. So we're honoring the kids who are already in Barlow, and we're giving the ones that want to give it a try, but being clear to their families that it may not be offered by the time they're a junior or senior. And then we provide that choice.
I would say that we can't guarantee that any course is
Well,
going to
that's
be
fair.
offered 4 years in the future, because we don't know what is going to happen with our budget cycle and all of these things.
Especially with 4 kids.
Especially with 4 kids. But on the flip side, I would also say that it's potential that if we showed a desire to have this last cohort be able to go through, that some of the other, because there were more than 4 8th graders who took Latin, and that we might end up getting 10 rising freshmen who wanted Latin if they knew that we were on the path to probably having that be the last class go through. So for that reason, I would lean towards including our rising freshmen, who are our kids in 6 months. That's my
Right, and
outlook.
so that is, it was reading my mind, I'm like, yes, that's what I was thinking. Do we continue if we accommodate those 4? I guess the question I'm asking is, do we do this as a one-room schoolhouse? Or do we do it the way we've done it this year, which is 2 sections, kind of an upper Latin and a beginning Latin, and then offer 2 sections of Latin where you would put those 4 students, and so you're really looking at 2 small classes, because you would combine, we have 9 sophomores and 4 freshmen, if we just talk about next year's numbers. So you'd be looking at 13, but then you'd only have 5 in your upper Latin class. So those are the numbers you'd be dealing with if you did 2. If we did 1 course, then you're looking at all of those students in 1 course, and it would be 1 section of 18. But that person, that teacher would be teaching 4 levels with levels in between.
You can't ask a foreign language teacher to teach 4 different levels at one time.
At honors level, and it's more than 4 levels, right? Because then you have honors and non-honors.
All right, I'm going to take a different position. I don't think we should offer the Latin 2 to the 4 incoming, stop the program. And I'm on the fence about sunsetting the rest of the kids through and just stopping the whole thing. So I'll leave it.
Am I understanding you're not even in support of allowing the remaining students to go through?
I'm on the fence for the
Okay.
remaining students to go through, but I don't think we should bring the new ones in. Because we're going to perpetuate a program, and then we're going to get to the situation that you just described, which is just ludicrous. There's no way somebody can teach that.
Right, nobody can teach all of those levels at one time, but going back to something that Tom said before, if all students from John Reed and Helen Keller are coming in at the same point, we might have more people choosing to take Latin as a first year in high school. And, you know, I think Latin is important enough as a language.
But how many of the kids coming from John Reed go into Latin 1? Do they not test into Latin 2?
Well, they won't after this year.
You're talking about the year.
This is the last
You're talking about the
cohort.
current 7th graders, so.
Right,
This is
right,
this-
right,
this
not
year's
this, not this
rising
rising freshman cohort, that four kids, who are currently taking Latin at the middle school. It's the next group of kids, so yes, it's the
See, I
current
think
seventh
you're
graders.
trying to say that the program could change the way it looks based on when all
Right.
of our kids are coming in at a level playing field. There might be more interest in Latin 1 all around, and so
Bless you.
So if we were going to offer Latin 2, why couldn't we make it Latin 1 and 2 and open it up to Easton kids and Reading kids and see if you get a full course load of kids?
We used to have Latin 1, and we didn't have an enrollment for it, which is why then we just offered Latin 2. So we used to offer a Latin 1 course, and students from Easton or students from Reading who didn't take Latin didn't enroll. So we have the
But what if we do
curriculum
that
for a
now?
Latin 1.
Right, if we're going to allow these 4 kids coming in to go ahead and take this class, why not open it to be Latin 1 and 2 and
Part of your-
promote that and see how many students you can get, right? And that we go based on those numbers then. Because what if you get 24 kids that want to sign up? Then you have a full course, then it's worth running that and taking those kids through, and then the following year you would get that many kids also, presumably.
That, just the,
Out of the-
right now, your budget is reflecting this one,
Right now,
virtual
our
language
budget
and,
was a point two.
and Latin. So to run 2 sections, you'd have to, you couldn't move people around and get the art teacher to do technology, the math teacher.
And
So
calculus and-
you would have to, it would have to be a cost increase.
Right.
I'm not saying,
Latin teacher.
I'm just saying that as a fact. I'm
And,
not,
but just to Juliet's point too, the 13 that are currently in Latin 2, only 4 of them expressed a desire to go on. So, I don't know, are you suggesting we go back to those 13?
Wait a minute,
and try
I
to
thought we had 9 sophomores, and we
Yes.
have 4 rising 9th graders.
Right, so,
Right, so if we're gonna say that one teacher can't teach all kids together, but she can teach the 14 kids that are already placed in that one room, and then we are going to keep 4 kids separate if we allow the rising ninth graders to take that class, why can't we open that class as Latin 1/2 and allow any incoming student from Easton or Reading to sign up for that class? After those students.
And I mean,
That's
I
up to
think
the
that-
board. We would have to put in another 2/10 of a teacher.
I think what we need to decide is if we, right now in our budget, we have 0.2 FTE for Latin. And if we want to allow the flexibility for 2 sections, we have to make the decision to increase that 0.2 to a 0.4 with the accompanying expense that would go along with that, and then we would throw it over to Paula and Angela, who would see where the numbers lay and how to divide those 2 sections up based on the kids that came in. And if you got a big influx of freshmen who wanted to take Latin 1, you'd probably have a 1-2, and then everybody else would be higher, or.
And that just
is
feels
that-
to me, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
I
no.
want to let-
I just wanted to make sure it was relatively accurate there.
That feels to me like a budgetary increase on speculative grounds. It honestly does. And in this environment, I can't certainly support a budgetary increase with a speculative ground. I can't. I want to see these kids through.
I agree with you on that.
I want to see these kids through. I don't think it's right for any educational institution to put something out there and make a promise to a child and then not deliver. But I cannot support increased expenditures on speculative grounds.
I think though the issue that Mary Lee brings up is that with our current budget number, it's sort of doubtful we can support the kids that we're, because the.
We can support them not in the way we wish. We wish we could provide something other than a one-room classroom, right? That's our wish for them. And maybe we have to provide something for them that is less than our wish,
I mean,
but provide something.
I would have the same concern about delivering quality with any class size here. One thing I was looking at the staffing document, I was worried about the other general ed class sizes where there was 28, 27, 25. And, you know, I agree, Maureen, with exactly what you just said, because while I love to be able to have us
Absolutely.
fund everything, I don't want it to be at the expense of a general ed student that now their class size is going to be 30 in humanities, history, where frankly, there may not be, no disrespect to those students, they may not be as enthusiastic as somebody that's in a push. And, you know, and those kids are gonna get lost. I'm worried about those kids. And and while I would love to honor Latin, I mean, I think I'm with Maureen on this in terms of just honoring the commitment to the existing students, and whether it be some subset of offering to the 4 or what Todd is suggesting, I think we just have to move forward that way. And to the point about if kids do, you know, we have all the Latin kids that graduated, that had that background in middle school, like any other offering, we could still put it on the course of the program of studies. And like anything else, like stagecraft, which I mentioned earlier, which I haven't offered in 4 years, it's still in the program of studies. And the kids pick it like anything else, and if there's an interest, we offer it. If there isn't, we don't.
And each individual student, if they're so inclined and so directed, could do that as some level of independent study at some point, if not a formalized language program.
Not Latin.
Then that's where my line falls. Then if they can't, they can't.
I think Mary Lee's point, though, is valid. If you're going to continue for the students that are already here, but you're going to do so in a way that might not be, I don't even want to say optimal, but it might not be even adequate. I mean, it's just the bare minimum. What does it hurt to, you know, separate it and run and see whether you do get, because, I mean, I've heard from parents that said that there were a lot of Latin students that would have taken it that didn't because they think we're gonna, you know, cut the program.
But I've
So-
also heard
That
from
could
a lot of
apply to
parents in
any
Easton are
class.
like, why are we continuing with Latin when nobody in Easton is taking that or is going to come into it? So I've heard the same on the other side.
I agree, but I'm just saying, you know, we're not saying eliminate Latin, that's it, the numbers are too low, everything goes, and in a couple of years, maybe we come back with German. What we're saying is that we're going to continue the program for the next 3 years, everyone in one class, and not bring in any new students. And
Is that what we're saying and agreeing?
well, those are the two choices,
I know.
right?
Yeah, right, that's the
I
only
think
other
that's
choice.
the 2 choices, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
Just making sure we have an
They're gonna
agreement
let
on
the
that.
new
yeah.
kids in and we're gonna service them or we're
Yep.
not.
Right.
So, I mean, as a board, we need to give direction, right? Because right now, we've got the 4 kids coming into Latin 2, and then the combination for everything else. So I'm hearing, we don't want to sunset the program out for the kids, or we want to let the kids that are in move out of the program and not do away with it.
I agree with
That's what
that.
I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And then what do we want to do with the 4 new ones coming in? I mean,
I
have a
prefer to
proposal on
run-
the table to keep
Well,
them, so if
I
we don't wanna
suppose
do that-
one thing you could do is a placement test. You know, is the kid ready to go to jump into Latin 3?
Would they be though?
Or, I mean, or I guess if you're going to, well,
I mean, isn't it like, maybe I'm oversimplifying this, but isn't this like the, you know, the calculus discussion we just had?
Yep.
Right? I mean, it's the same thing,
Right.
you know? We rely on the administration to do those evaluations and then make that individual determination for those 4 students, just like we're doing with calculus. And we're still trying to honor what we can, their interest, without necessarily adding cost or, and we're honoring the existing students in both subjects.
But we told administration to run calculus.
Sorry, I picked that as an example, it's a bad
So,
example.
yeah.
That's not quite what we said.
It's not,
So
Not quite what
we
we
could tell them to run 2 sections of Latin and let the kids come in and see how many new kids come in and,
Yeah,
And then
On
we're
2
kicking the
sections
can.
of Latin, it is a $17,523 increase.
increase
right. I
for
support,
students we don't have. I totally oppose that.
I think someone needs to make a motion.
no, we don't usually
Yeah,
vote
no,
on
we
just
want that
individual
direction.
things.
All right.
It's part of when we make a motion on the budget.
Okay.
Unless, Todd, I mean,
No,
it's your
I-
show,
no.
whatever you want to do.
It just
We-
seems to
we don't-
me
I don't
like
think we need a motion, I
hear
just think
some
we need a
division
direction.
here.
Yeah, I just think we need direction, motion, I agree. We just need to make a motion for the overall budget.
That's
So I
fine,
think-
but I just hear disagreement amongst here, so I just wanted clarity, that's all.
Point is well taken. I'm just saying, I don't know
Has
how
to
you
be
get
by
there.
motion, has to be by clarity.
Well, you could always make a motion that
I'm
you're
not-
getting.
No, I just wanted to
Well, I
advance
also
the
think we have
discussion.
no
I was looking at
decision
the
on
clock.
whether or not we're allowing the rising ninth graders to
I think
enter the
that's
program or
decision.
not enter the program, and that's the deciding
Hand-
factor,
yes,
isn't
I
it?
think that's
is.
the thing right now. So
Right.
either we can do a hand vote or we can do a motion on it. I don't think we need a formal motion. You're gonna tell me we can't do a hand vote, right? So-
So I'll make a motion that the Region 9 Board direct the administration to run 2 sections of Latin next year and to open the program up to the rising freshmen for the 2020-2021 school year. Or for the future, how's that? Because I want to limit it to that.
And that's a motion.
Yes.
Seconding that motion.
Right, do we need more discussion? I think we've discussed it quite a bit already, but anyone else? All right, so, you want to, I guess we should vote on that, or can you repeat it so we're clear on what, so it's 2 sections of Latin?
2 sections of Latin and allow the 8th graders to come in.
and so could I make a friendly amendment? You'd be directing the administration to increase
Increase the
by
budget
the-
by
Point
$7,000.
$17,523.
Yeah, whatever the
Point 2, okay.
associated
All
expenses.
right, so that's the motion. All in favor? Aye? All right, all opposed? So what was that, 3?
It was 4-3.
4 to 3?
Passed.
Yeah. So that passed.
I
No,
oppose.
sorry. Oh, that was opposed. So one more
So
time.
again.
So, sorry, one more time.
Try to get
All in
four.
favor, sorry, all in favor, hands high. All in favor, hands high. All right, so it's four and opposed. 4 to 3. So it does pass.
That's bad.
So again, just for the motion so we're clear, it's to offer 2 sections,
One
Oh.
section with 4 students.
1 section with 4 students.
Right now,
Currently.
currently
Right, I
4.
would
Allow
say
the
that's
Opening
language
it-
department to
to
decide.
decide how to
No, no, hold on.
distribute the
Currently with 4 students, opening it up for enrollment and adding a .2 at 17,000 into the budget.
But I don't necessarily think that section has to have 4 students.
It does
because
right now.
That's what it-
But we're
that's
saying
what we're
open
saying
it up.
Can we leave it to the department chair to
Department,
to
because they
divvy
might
up?
end up with
Yeah.
it being Latin 2,
In
3,
consultation
and
with
then
the Latin
Latin
teacher.
3, 4, 5. And they'll decide how the kids
That's
get
right, that's why I
divided up
said
in the best
2
way into 2
sections and let the
sections.
experts
You wouldn't-
figure it out. See, I
That's
call it
fine, but
experts.
we need to understand what the impact on the budget is.
So
$17,000
for a .2
So this
to
is
have a
going up.
second. Yep, so the budget's gonna go up 17,000.
17 what?
17,000.
17,000 roughly.
$17,523.
Clarifying point, so then are we gonna, try to remember Julia's suggestion, are we gonna try to open this up to other,
Yes, that was in the
Freshmen?
motion.
yeah, okay.
To allow, yeah. So we're directing Paula to go back to the freshman class,
The rising,
the rising freshman class.
At both schools, so that you can have Easton students too.
So we're adding Latin 1 to this schedule.
not my charge.
And Paula's going to teach it.
Oh, no.
Just get your calculus certificate.
Right, but you don't, again, we haven't approved the final budget, so
We have
this is
not.
just a
Right.
direction of change,
Yeah.
so there's no action yet
Well,
beyond the budget
right, so
direction.
we should not, that's a great clarification. Paula should not be moving on this
That is correct.
until we get a final budget.
That's
That is
right,
correct.
I got it, I'm
that
just
is right.
taking notes.
Anything can happen
Anything,
between now and then.
yeah, exactly, between the
horse
final
trade
vote
later
and
on.
the budget. All right, so I think we've tackled Latin. Anything else in academics? I know we had some discussion about AP classes. I know it's getting late, but offering APs to sophomores, or is there anything else people want to tackle on the academic?
On the
and-
staffing
and the
document, any
staff
other
and- yeah.
questions we can answer for you?
I think
No.
academic and human resources, we kind of combined those 2
Yep.
pages. I know we wanted to talk athletics as well, but anything else
I do.
on those couple of pages?
Well, I don't actually know where this came in, but when I was perusing, I noticed that under Board of Education, 330, other professional services, we have $4,000 for a start time study, which I'm not necessarily in support of, because I think
Yeah.
there's general consensus that going to school in the pitch black is not a good thing. If anything, I would say that, you know, our changing our start time is hindered by our geography and our transportation primarily. The thing that is preventing us from changing our start time is that we don't have $2 million to add an extra round of buses. So basically, I would say if we wanted to do anything regarding start time, it would start with having Scott and Oliver, you know, sort of crunch the numbers about different ways we could get the kids to school at different
So you're
times without
suggesting
spending
remove
$4,000
that $4,000.
to have somebody tell us that starting school at 7:30 is not ideal for 16-year-olds.
Can I speak to that?
That's me.
So the start time study would, part of the task force, first off, I don't think that, I think we have to pay attention to this, and I think 4,000 is a very modest amount of money. We can see that regions in the neighborhood and in the area are going in this direction. We saw the entire state of California go there. I want to be able to look at it and be able to report back to you. I mean, the findings of the task force could be, it's not financially available to you. But I think another finding could be, you could go from 3 bus runs to 2. I don't know until we actually do the work. I do know that there's an interest for us to explore this from members in the community. It's been raised a couple of times in a couple of the other board meetings. And I guess if you want to pull that money out, I would still do the task force. I just wouldn't do it with resources, but.
I would just add to that, that if this does hinge heavily around planning of bus routes, which I agree it certainly would, I think we would need to rely heavily upon First Student to do that work. I don't think that's exclusively in-house for us to perform. I do not know, because I've not asked the question, if there would be incremental costs associated with that.
Right.
So
I
is
mean,
there
I'm not
4,000
opposed to, I completely agree with all the studies that say that we're start school too early. I think that the finances are the barrier, and the finances and we certainly could do 2 bus runs. It would have to be introduced in a more adept political manner than it was 6 or 7 years ago. But
The very reason that I want to conduct a task
it
force
could certainly,
to look into this.
there are basically a couple of options, and they all involve changing the buses in
Is
one
there
way or another.
$4,000 in each of the budgets?
Yeah.
So all 3 districts?
Correct.
And that number is a real number, or it's just a guesstimate?
No, a real number would be $70,000 or $80,000 for, something far, far higher for, to have some other group of people do it. We're looking for resources to be able to purchase studies or engage folks, and, it's a modest amount.
Because to Gwen's point, it's really financial and transportation in nature, because if we're paying for scientific research and all that stuff, there's so much of it out there. New Canaan just did theirs, and Ridgefield does, like, you can, all that
Completely in
stuff is
agreement
there.
with you,
You just
and-
need to figure out whether or not we
Which
can
is why,
afford it.
which is why I'm asking for such a nominal amount. You don't have to initiate new sleep study research. It's to give, if this is going to work, it can't be, let's meet next Tuesday in the auditorium, we're gonna totally upend how you guys run your 3 schools. It's gotta be, large enough to engage all the stakeholders, in a year-long or more study. I think this is money well spent. And I'm not spending your money, right? So I'm trading for you. I'm not going to national conferences. I no longer belong to any of the groups that Bernie belonged to. I think this is a really modest request. You can take it out. I will make do without it, but I think in the scope of your budget, it's such a small amount.
Tom, I'm confused about where will the money be spent? What is it gonna be spent on?
I don't know yet. That's why it's a placeholder.
I think a certain amount of it will be spent with our First Student, our transportation.
We'll have to pay them to
I-
look at the bus routes
I don't know for
again?
certain, I've never actually asked the question, but it's not, I know that it is a laborious activity to do. It's extremely painstaking. So, I know that they offer it as a service, to optimize routes. Some of that we do operationally naturally through our normal thing, but with this type of thing, I think it's gonna be a lot more oriented towards what ifs. What if the start times are oriented this way? Blah, 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 blah. What if they were oriented this way? Blah, 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 right? Pros and cons, implications, longest route, what do you have to do to keep it under an hour, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a little bit of gaming out different things, and I just wouldn't want to say directly off the top of my head that would be included in the pricing that we already have today.
Yeah, and I completely understand having to spend money for that. I'm dubious of spending money on a sleep study science that I think there's general consensus that our kids go to school too early.
Right.
That was my
I'd be in
point there.
favor if the other districts are, because I think we should be equal stakeholders. I don't want to get, but,
But, sorry, so it's the dollar amount we're talking about, right? I mean, we're going
yes,
to come
but,
back with the proposal
but
for what
before,
they're going to spend it on.
before we leave it in, I
So
would
we
be
don't know.
curious as to, is this an administrative initiative, or is this going to be a task force comprised of board members and administration, or exactly what is it? Just so I know going in.
I'm not, I really, other than putting in the placeholder, I have not spent a lot of brain time on this. I think it can't do anything of merit if we don't have a board representative from each of the 3 boards. I think we'd need to look at traffic patterns in the town and how the Southwest Conference, the athletic conference, is impacted, and the start times of the elementary and middle schools and so forth. It's something that I haven't worked on yet.
So, do we want to pull the number out, leave the number in for right now?
I guess it sort of goes to, I feel like it maybe needs a tri-board committee to go with its budget
Right.
number, and then, yeah,
You know
But
how
it's
much
in
I
all
love
three,
the
yeah.
tri-board, but
But if it's in
I
all
would,
three
well, it is
budgets.
gonna need a.
I just think it's
a
in
joint
there now, I
committee.
would leave it in,
Transportation.
because they're gonna do it anyway, so I don't want
Yeah, we'll have to pull money from
to
someplace else
have one of those
participate.
meetings where they say, well, you guys didn't pay anyway, so you
Yes,
don't get a
I agree.
Yeah.
say on it,
All right, so we're gonna leave that item for now.
Yes.
We can revisit it next week,
Yes.
since we'll be
Put
here
a
next
little
week.
asterisk next to it if we have to.
All right, any other items on academic programs, human resources, or, I know we haven't talked athletics, if we want to do that. I do want to live a little bit, because I did ask Gina to pin the items, if they could have things restored from the budget they presented, what would be the priority and those items, so I do want them to come back. 'Cause that's always a question we ask, if there was something they could add back in, what would be their priority and preference?
So you're okay with the Chinese menu going the opposite way, but you're not okay with the
I
Chinese
just wanted to
menu
hear
coming
what the,
down,
that's
right?
right, I wanted to hear what the options were.
Just the menu.
If we were to
Okay,
give
all
some
right.
money back for certain things. So I guess before we get, I know I think the the freshman basketball is on there, but are there any other athletic questions, or we want to talk through that, or anything? I guess first, let's close out on academic programs and human resources. Any other items in that?
Just so I'm clear, going back to my earlier comment about the concern of having larger classes, larger general ed classes, so, virtual lang was still, I think the cut is still here, so we're talking about the class of 23 kids, and, wellness, I think the class size is going up there too, that's still in there, right? Spanish, there's gonna be one class size that has 28 kids.
28, I think it did, yep.
And then English, there's the one with the 26 class. I'm just gonna throw this question out to the board, are we okay with those large class sizes?
Well, you don't want me to start overanalyzing that. You said we leave our experts,
Well-
and they're okay with it, so then
Well-
when I question about other
Well,
things, you go,
yeah,
why
yeah,
are you
but no,
questioning them?
no. In fairness to them, we
Are
asked
they
them to
okay
do
with
it,
it?
so.
Well, are
Yes,
they
are,
okay with
because they
it?
presented it, so we know they're.
They're making it work.
They're making it work.
Well, and Cheryl, the difficulty is, you could have a class of 30 kids, and you could buzz through material, and you can have a class of 17 kids and get through half of it. So just the number of kids, you can't say, 28 kids is too much, because we don't know the makeup, and you won't know
Right.
until it starts and stuff. So, having been a teacher myself, 28 doesn't scare me.
And then I just, again, I want to understand people's thinking. That is not scary, but yet, smaller class sizes, calculus and Latin, again, to pick on them, but there are others. That is scary, where we actually need two sections. That's the point I'm trying to make, because I want there, as much as we can provide, and I know not everything's fair, I want to be able to provide parity with all our programs. And,
Right.
and it's just screaming out at me that we're leaving this on the table.
No, it's true. I just think the difference is we're not saying that we're teaching English 1, 2, 3, and 4 in one section, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
We're breaking it up, so if you're saying, would a Latin class, Latin 2 class of 40 students scare me? Yeah, it would too, but it's the same thing. We're not lumping all the humanities in one class. It's just a bigger, cohort. Right? I don't know.
As a comment,
Okay.
so.
All right. Anything else? Anyone else? Otherwise, I think just any general, we haven't talked athletics yet, if we wanted to cover that. Otherwise, we can end with what they would like to have reinstated, if we wanted to consider those options. So do we want to talk athletics really quickly? I know there's one item on there for consideration on the reinstatement, but in general, we always, again, try to provide parity and talk through the athletic program. So does anybody have any questions on that? Because we haven't really covered that specifically. It's not a page on here.
No, so we can discuss when we get into these about the reinstatements, but I ask this question every year, and Mr. Santangeli loves it when I do it, but like, is there any way, can we use less tennis balls or less something? Is there anything in there, you know,
We got a new
wash
tennis
the
court.
mats
We need tennis balls.
2 times less, or what, like, is there anything in there, or have you, you know, gotten to the point now where it's like, this is what I need?
For the number of programs that we do have, what we need. I mean, to be honest with you, I think we have to be careful in athletics because, well, over 90% of it is contract services too. So when you're going and you're gonna try to bring down that number, you're going at things like reconditioning. When you recondition, you can't maintain things for as long a period of time as you need because we're on a 5-year to 6-year cycle for uniforms. So, and the majority of that money that we have in 613, which is the supplies, are uniforms. So, you know, out of the 30 some odd programs that we have, 5 come up every single year, 6 come up every single year for uniforms, and, you know, they average out to be about $4,000, $4,500, you know, a set. So that's where the majority come down. Then yes, we need, you know, we laugh about it, but we need we need baseballs. We need, you know, we need replacement equipment, like expensive equipment, such as helmets. They're on a cycle. So like football helmets, after a certain amount of years, you have to replace the helmets. They're a few $100s a piece. Shoulder pads, same thing. So it's just, it's costly. Now, you know, I would say that, you know, at the end of the day, that there isn't some wiggle room. That's why we brought that down, I think, $5,000 or whatever. So we're trying to move with the times because we have less kids. So we're trying to, you know, accommodate that. There's less helmets that we have to replace, things like that. So we're trying to move with the times, but overall, it's what we need.
What it is, okay. Probably Walter's budget, but we don't have to fill those big cracks in the tennis courts, you know. Get out there and play this year. No.
If we don't get snow on top of it,
All right.
So,
So any other general others, let's go maybe to reinstatement activities, and I'm also just thinking, do we need to have everybody here for the last few items?
Well, and if we're not gonna vote tonight,
Yeah,
maybe you
I don't
wanna
think we
let
aren't gonna
Scott,
vote,
Scott's
so.
gotta be exhausted.
Yeah, I mean, we have 2 items that we need to have added back
Yeah, I
in,
suppose
so I don't think
if
we'll
we
have
can
a
let
motion
Scott
tonight.
go, I think maybe Mike, we want to keep Mike for, you're going to talk about
Yeah,
basketball.
Yeah.
I know
Anybody
most
else?
of the administrators, they just love being here, there's
Well,
nothing
you know,
else
they
to
care very
do.
much about what we reinstate, and
No,
I think this is a really important slide for
Yeah,
them to.
can we
all
just
right, let's
jump
go.
into it?
So if we
Let's
could
go
just
for
do it, it's,
reinstatement. Yep.
we've spoken about all of these items. What we've done here is, what we were asked to do, which is if we were going to put these in a hierarchy, at what would we like back and when? And I would say we'd like them all back. It would make our budget 1.40. But if we were going to put them back in any kind of order, we spoke about the importance of those summer days, the work that goes on here to close out one school year and get the other school year going. The counselor visits, we've had just some wonderful experience with, I think I'm missing a word, because the counselors aren't just visiting people, they're visiting colleges. And we've had some great relationships with colleges. We didn't eliminate this line, but we cut it in half. And so it's something that we think we get a lot of positive feedback, and it works for our students. We put down the basketball. It is the only freshman program. We know that our towns support their students K through 8 in club sports. This would be an ask in asking them to support K through 9 in club sports. It's the last of our freshman sports. We have a good number that's coming. This wasn't an enrollment driven. This was everybody's taking a bite of that, just like the summer days were not enrollment driven. It's not that we have less work to do. It's more the counselor visits. All of these were, you know, we want to just contribute, because every little bit we add to the budget in some areas, we want to make sure we're being responsible, especially to our town in Easton that really is going through a struggle with that. The secretary in counseling, it's a position, when Mike spoke about the rests and the secretarial support. I have that information for the Southwest Conference that we're in, because many towns are going through the same thing. How many secretaries? I mean, we're a little lean. Most of the towns have, for example, a secretary to support administrative assistant principals. We do not have a secretary supporting our our assistant principals. We have amazing people that do incredible amounts of work. In fact, we're pulling job descriptions, and people are doing incredible work. So I think we're adequately staffed in the support. It will be painful if we have to lose the secretary in counseling. We think we do have a plan for those essential jobs to be put, but if we were going to have that back, we would love to have that back. The substitute line, we have a $50,000 reduction there. It's something we can talk about in more detail, but we know that we could, we have a shot at covering our classes with our current personnel. If we could get that back, it would make a lot of people relieved, because we are split. We're not 100% saying, let's see what life is like without substitutes. We had it in our original budget because we'd rather keep our classes intact. So one of the things that you're not going to see on this list for consider for reinstatement are those FTEs that we reduced because of low enrollment. You could put them back, and we can have class sizes that are 15 and 13, and that's fine, or 20 even for some of our larger classes. But if we were going to look to reinstate, that's the order that we would suggest. Our last slide are those three different scenarios of our current budget proposal, which is .98. If we just included the recent developments, it would be .99. This has to be adjusted if we're going to add that 17,000 back in. And then if we were going to add all of the reinstated considerations, that's where we would be at. And that's what we have. If there's specific questions, and then, as Todd said, if there's
So
things we
let's just
can
cover
look
the reinstatement. I'm gonna open that up. So does anyone feel strongly about any of the items that were removed, that on this list, that you would like to be considered to be brought back in?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
which ones?
So-
So we can give direction for a number.
I think the freshman basketball, for the small amount of money it is something that's not enrollment driven, and that's just picking on one sport, and it's a bad way of saying it. It's just, it's unfair to a certain group that plays a certain sport. I think, you know, I would rather see, if we need to take $17,890 out of athletic, I would rather say, take $17,890 out of athletic and spread it amongst everybody and equally. I'm not comfortable just saying to the kids that play basketball that there's no freshman basketball. So that's where I stand on that one.
All right, can we just, on that one,
I'm
is
so
everybody?
confused. Do you want the
You
basketball
want
or
the
not?
basketball
You do.
back in?
Okay.
So everybody
Yes.
else in agreement
Yes.
with
Yes.
Okay.
modeling it and putting basketball? Okay, so we're asking to put basketball back in, freshman basketball back into the budget at 17,890, okay? All right, any other items on the list?
The one I'd like to hear more about is substitutes, because it's $50,000, and I don't want to under budget and then come back and say, oh yeah, our substitutes are $30,000 over budget, because it can happen, and I'm not saying it, I'm just saying, I would really like to know whether everyone is comfortable that we can make everything work with that $50,000 reduction, or are we gonna be robbing Peter to pay Paul to kind of make those things work? And if so, then is there a number that's we're more comfortable with, or
I was thinking, what if we made that at 25? I mean, because I love the idea that people are willing to pitch in. People, you know, I'm sure Jen and Julie are gonna get pulled into some of those classes, or they'll come to Commons. Jean will do some teaching. That's terrific. I like the spirit. And that's great if you have like a teacher who's out for one day and the kids come to Commons for a day, but when they're out for 4 days, you need a sub in that room. So do we feel like we can operate for those situations where we have a multiple day absence, or would be better to put a little bit of this back?
So Todd, I'll leave that to you. I do have something I can hand out for subs. It's 10 of 11. Do you want us to come back, or do you want me to?
I think maybe for the second workshop,
why
I
I'm-
guess just from a sentiment perspective, are we asking to put money back in for substitutes, or do we want further discussion around that? It sounds like
Further
your
discussion, I mean, yeah.
Sounds like
I
your
wanna
favor
be
putting
more
some money
comfortable.
back in, maybe not the full 50?
But maybe, yeah, I'd like to hear about, a little bit more about everybody's comfort level, especially for multiple day absences. You know, it's Tuesday, your math teacher's out, you can come to Common and you can study. Math teacher's out all week.
I would rather use as much of that substitute money to fund some of these other classes that have not been restored back from the last meeting. So going
I have no problem doing that either. My fear is that substitutes are substitutes. People get sick or they go, and you hire them anyway. So if we're lowering that number because we're trying to meet another number, we're gonna end up robbing Peter to pay Paul. If we're comfortable with that number, and we've seen that historically that we can do with the $50,000 left, then I feel differently about it. I guess that's my perspective.
That number, so the amount that's in the budget now is 40,000. We have always budgeted close to 100,000, sometimes more. The concern that the debate that's going on isn't, can we cover the single-day subs, but what would we do is we say you have 2 long-term maternity leaves and then one person gets injured and you have to have 3 teachers in for a long period of time. 40,000 wouldn't do. We're trying to find the amount that we feel comfort with, so somewhere between 40 and 90 is for us to talk about maybe next time.
And what do we historically, does anyone?
We tend to run it at probably about 100. I think it
Right,
was 90 and you took.
We
No,
reduced, it was 100. we went
actual,
over.
not what we
Oh,
budgeted.
actuals? Yeah, we'll have to.
What do we actually?
We haven't
spend?
run over, so I could bring you the historic actuals.
That might
Yeah.
be helpful. I mean, if we're
But-
looking to restore somewhere
Yes.
between 40 and 90, if we know what we've been spending
So
every
maybe we
year.
can do a 3-year, 4-year look back, Scott. Not right now.
Wants to go, we'll have it in 10 seconds.
All right, so that'll be another ask to look historically what we've spent in the substitute line, actually. So then if we're running higher than 40, we might want to put some more back into it, I think is kind of the direction we're looking at. And somewhere between, $0 to $50, putting back into that, or 50,000 to put back into that line.
If only.
Yep, okay. So I'll make that, all right,
And
any
so-
other
Well,
items
so
to
then, as
bring
we're talking about these, I know, if my memory serves me well, I think Maureen had a concern 2 years ago about the secretary and the counseling.
You have a good memory.
And so, I don't know whether that document showing how we're staffed compared with other districts and how that fits in, and I would like to know whether this has a detrimental effect on students or parental access, or whether it's a different, I just like to understand better what impact that reduction will have. I'm not there saying put it back in yet, but I know Maureen is.
I mean, it's been proposed a number of times.
Yes.
So each time, someone must be reconsidering it. I would imagine that they gave it thought again.
So what is the ask then?
The ask is for them to provide us with a little detail as to what impact that position would have on students and parental access, and whether or not they were, obviously, I mean, no one wants to reduce anything, but I'm just saying, your level of comfort as to how that's going to impact things, I think, is something I'd like to know.
I would more be interested in knowing specifically the tasks that you would be reallocating from that secretarial position.
shared some of that on.
And if I missed that in there, I'm sorry.
It's not in this, but on February 18th,
Okay.
we highlighted
Some.
major tasks that, and what we would, where we would put those.
Okay, I'll take a look at that, though.
All right, other items off of that
What about the
list,
top
or
item?
any-
Are we keeping that or not?
The top item's on the top because it's really,
That one back.
Yeah, I think so, right? You can't
Wait a
open the
minute,
doors,
these
no
lists are never in
schedules and
order.
no.
They
This one
always
is Friday.
say
I
it's
asked
never
them-
in
no, no,
order.
I asked
They
them
never
No,
say
I
it's in
did
order.
say that I
I
did
did ask
follow
for
the
it.
tasks,
She said
and I
it was
put them in
priority.
We should
order.
have put
ask.
numbers, then we would have known they
But
were
I
in
did ask to prioritize.
orders.
I did ask to
You need to listen
prioritize.
better, Mike.
Well, they've never been in order. Every year
So
we
we're
go
keeping-
in order and
keeping that.
they're never in
I
order.
asked
Order,
for
we
them
put them in order.
I always ask for them in
Advance
order.
the
So, let's
discussion,
go.
advance the discussion, advance the discussion.
Okay, so
Summer
we're
days.
keeping line one.
I think we
That's,
should.
that's the consensus?
I'd need to know more.
Yeah, I wanna discuss this one
We
too.
want further discussion.
Yeah.
So further discussion on summer days. Okay,
Got a pretty short list for our next meeting, though, you gotta admit.
it's not too bad.
It's
I got it.
short, yeah, we'll get
Yeah.
through this in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I have only three questions,
we're
so we
gonna
have
watch
to,
it
three
after
items that
10.
we're adding. All right, so any other
parking
items
lot.
anybody wants to cover right now in this meeting? I'll recap what I have on my list of what are the questions and what are the increases I think we agreed to make sure we're all on the same page on that.
Well, I'm still curious about the custodial thing.
What about the custodial?
I just, is there a way we can do part of a custodian that gives you more coverage or something? I'm afraid we're running it too tight, and
All right. So can we, I guess that'd be a question, can we see what the cost would be of adding,
Definitely look at,
not saying to
there's a
not
structure,
to
Walter would
model
like
it yet,
as
but to
some
see
type of
what it would be to
part-time
bring that back
person,
in.
maybe.
Okay, so cost of custodian. All right. So I'm gonna try to recap from my notes here, what we've asked to reinstate back in, and then what we'd like to discuss in the next meeting in more detail. So, we would like to add the bond premium in, from the, into the debt management.
I'm sorry, I'm not clear on that. I don't know what we bottomed out on that.
reduction of the 73 or whatever in this year's budget, and then the 32 would come out in next year's principal payments.
So that would
But you
leave us,
can-
that would leave us an extra 70 odd K unexpended this year.
Correct, which we could put into pension, healthcare, or the capital reserve.
Yeah. Is
So,
everybody okay with that? Is
So
that everybody's agreement, or was?
so just so I'm clear, once again, as it's a little late, I'm not at full speed. Pay the last two interest payments that we owe in the 1920 budget out of excess bond premium from the bond, as opposed to from the 1920 budget. And then what happens next year?
Well, we have the 32,000 would be left over, so
We
I
would
would-
reduce the 2021 budget by 32,000.
Yes.
yes, for the principal in that fiscal year.
So I think we wanted to see that as an option.
But not more than that, we did discuss whether not to apply the entire 105 to the interest for next year.
No, we're gonna put 73
This
in
year.
this year's
Yeah.
30 in
and
next.
32 in next year's.
No, I understand that, but I thought there was an opportunity to actually even reduce that even further.
Sure, there is.
That's what I would want clarity on. I don't know,
When,
we should.
you mean after we close the project down?
Yeah.
But that would be after the project, with the.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
No, I
yes,
think
yes.
just
So that
with the
this,
bond
this
that
is
we
what
have
we
now.
know, right.
Right.
Yeah, for timing purposes, we could get into a reasonable estimate of available funds left.
Yep.
Discuss it, we can cover it the next meeting.
So again, using 70,000, 73 roughly in this year. the
73,
remaining
32
into next year,
into next year.
to reduce next year's budget by the 32. And then, I guess, do we want to see what that would do to interest payments, or we just want to see what it does in the budget? I'm okay with just seeing it in the
I
budget.
just want to,
Only in the budget.
In the
really.
budget.
does in the budget.
The interest payments are what the interest payments
Yeah.
are. We're just deciding what
Paying them
funding
early.
source
Yeah,
pays them.
funding source, okay. All right, so that's good. So then the next item, increase the budget 17,523 for Latin point two, to have 2 sections of Latin. Then an increase of the 17,890 to restore freshman girls boys basketball. And then we had some items for discussion on the substitutes line. What's the actual spend on that historically, looking back a couple of years? The impact of the secretary in counseling reduction and how that work's being reallocated, so discussion on that. More discussion on summer days, and then the cost of reinstating custodian.
What was the last thing?
The cost of reinstating a custodian. Or not reinstating, but adding, because they were never.
Adding a custodian
Yeah, adding.
half-time and this time,
Yeah.
yes?
But those are all the items I have. Do you have anything different from secretary for recording of notes?
Who knows, I don't know.
Or anyone else from their notes?
Been all
Hand this out.
together. I'll send you mine and you
Okay,
can fix
all right.
them.
Does anyone else have anything different at this point? Okay, all right, so we're good. We're gonna close out the budget discussion unless anybody has anything else.
Sorry, but
All right, that's
last
fine.
time we talked about pension and health insurance reserve, a suggestion by the administration to consider contributing 200K to pension contribution and then consider contributing some of the unexpended medical fund. Is that still on the table, or is that still something that we can consider? Or is there, and if we can still do it, is the board interested in looking at these? These would be offset, these would be budget offsets.
Yes.
I'm not interested in it, but it can be done.
Will we add that to our list for next
Yeah,
time?
I would be interested in hearing.
I would be interested in
So,
hearing that.
let's add it to next.
Because I'm not gonna understand it if we start
Yeah.
talking about it
Yeah,
this
no,
time of
understood.
night.
Late.
It's gonna
Sorry,
be a
it's getting
tough
the
line
numbers
for
at
me
11 o'clock.
anyway.
Yes, all right. So this will be the, what do we,
This is
what's
the
the excess?
humanities end of the table.
What's the excess cost? Reducing those items so we
So
don't
you
have
have
excess.
304,000
Right. And
is the number.
I'll take that a step further. I'd like to see if the board has interest in this. I'd like to see if we can use some of these funds to restore some of the educational programming that we did not restore tonight. And I'm talking about just the reducing class sizes, whatever the administration thinks, if they want to prioritize things that we didn't restore tonight. If the board approved using some of this money to bring some of that back, what would you want to bring back?
I don't know that you can use that money that way.
I don't know that, no, because it would reduce if we reduce these
we're
payments,
saying
reduce the
reduce the
overall
payments, so
budget.
there's
Yeah, you
money
wouldn't
coming
apply
out
the
of the
payments to
operating,
that, you would just reduce the overall budget.
Wally King would say that's a no-no.
That's a no, but Wally's not here.
If
All
we-
right,
If
so,
we can't do it, then that's okay.
No, it's,
Right.
it's,
all right,
Otherwise,
so we're
I'm
gonna add
not-
that, we're gonna add that
That's
to
your
the
field, I'm not
discussion.
the
Yeah, we'll
expert.
add that to the discussion for next week, so.
Engage it with clearer minds.
Exactly. All right, so is that it then? Everybody, that's our list? All right, so then, at this point, I'm gonna close out the discussion, so we'll bring these items up for the second budget workshop next week on the 12th.
it's only 11
March, I know, well, we still have public comment and board member comment, we're not done yet. All right, so I'm going to move on to item 6, public comment. So anyone from the public that's still there, and thank you for still being here. If you would like to comment, please come forward to the podium. We do
I'll
ask
be
to keep
quick.
it short, thank you.
Reed Gray from 15 Lone Town Road in Reading. I just want to thank everybody here for everything you're doing. I was on a co-op board in Manhattan for 10 years or so, and I know how much work it is to do this budgeting, but you're also trying to do the best you can for a bunch of kids, and that's an order of magnitude harder. So I just want you to know I really appreciate it, and I think my kids really appreciate it too. So thank you.
Jeff Fligelman, Pocahontas Road, Reading. Again, thank you for your work and effort. Thank you for supporting our children, supporting Barlow's Latin program, not having 4 levels in one class. I very much appreciate it. I think all of our children do as well. I also think by having those 2 sections, there's a wonderful opportunity here for all students in Easton and Reading, all rising freshmen, should now have the opportunity to take Latin at Joel Barlow High School. And that's a wonderful possibility. Thank you very much.
Carol Murray, Sport Hill Road in Reading, and I just want to echo the other gentleman's comments. Thank you for carefully considering a lot of very difficult options, and I've been at this podium a lot speaking about Latin, so thank you for listening, and I hope that the changes that have been proposed can hopefully address and garner some interest from additional students in the program, as well as serving the ones that are in there, including my senior, who's the one person signed up for Latin 5. So I hope he doesn't have a scheduling problem. But anyway, I very much appreciate it, so thank you.
My name is Joanne Gray, and I'm at Lone Town Road here in Reading. And I just want to thank you for carefully considering calculus and keeping that in Latin, and just really taking into consideration all of the times that our children have come up here to talk to you about how important these programs are. And I know that I sent a text to my children, and they, one of them is a rising freshman, and one of them will be a junior next year. And they both thank you, and their friends thank you for keeping Latin. It means a lot. It means a lot to them. So thank you.
Been on the public comment. Thank you all for staying late and your comments. And all right, board member comment. Let's go, Gwen. Any final comments?
Save them for next week.
Yes,
Excellent.
I've got lots for next week.
Right.
I will also,
Pages.
other than to say thank you for coming out to
To these folks.
our students and to all the parents that come out. We appreciate hearing from you as well, and we're here to serve you, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you for everybody participating, and as a parent of a basketball student, thank you to the board for restoring basketball.
Juliet,
You get the purple tunnel?
She can't.
She filled up a whole notebook.
Didn't know what you signed up
All right,
for.
may I just say, again, thank you for everyone here for, again, all your hard work and going through this over and over and staying late with us on a school night, so we appreciate all your hard work. We will do this again, but hopefully shorter next week on the 12th. And with that, then I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. All right, we are adjourned at 11:07. Thank you again, everyone.